pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. The Danvers Public Schools is a dynamic community of independent learners dedicated to respect, responsibility, creativity, and the pursuit of academic and personal excellence. This meeting is being broadcast by Danvers Community Access Television. Is there anybody else who is in the audience recording the proceedings? No? Okay. Good. Now, first of all, with everybody in the audience, please make sure you have a mask on. Thank you. Now, we will begin with items of interest to the superintendent, school committee, and community.
Thank you. From the superintendent, I know later in the agenda we do have our CPAC updates at the beginning of the meeting. Would like to share that our CPAC has our resource fair is back after having to take a break last year, which will take place this Thursday, October 21st at the Holton Richmond Middle School from 6 to 8 p.m. And flyers have been distributed electronically through our principals, and we'll be sending out another reminder tomorrow to all of our families. So we hope our families will take advantage of this opportunity and come and see the many organizations that are available as resources to our families.
Great.
We thank our CPAC co-chairs for putting this together, and we look forward to an upcoming meeting where our CPAC co-chairs and Lynn O'Neill, our new director, will be here to share more information.
Is that all from you, Lisa?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any items of interest from the school committee? No? Okay. Are there community members with items of interest? I see one. Would you please go to the two? Identify yourself and tell us what you have to say, please.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Jim Morose. I'm a lifelong Danvers resident, town meeting member, and both my daughters graduated from Danvers High last century. Okay. So I just got a quick one. I, along with everyone here, just want the best for our Danvers students, our town, our state, and our nation. You know, there are at least two sides to every issue, and we need to just be respectful of all our discussions when we talk about these things. Tonight, I'm just kind of concerned about the national educational trends and their impact on local districts, including Danvers School District. There are numerous national issues that trickle down, for example, the CTR, mask mandates, vaccine mandates, and educational metrics and standards. But tonight, I just want to focus on specifically the DOJ and Judge Merrick Garland reclassifying parents and local community members who speak out about school issues as domestic terrorists. Again, at the Danvers School Committee meeting of August 23rd, 2021, numerous concerned parents and citizens spoke in opposition to the mask mandates. Numerous letters were sent to the school committee regarding this issue as well. Does this mean we may be on the DOJ's domestic terrorist watch list now? Just a rhetorical question. But again, I'm highly concerned that a healthy debate of serious issues may be canceled due to citizen fear of being reported as argumentative and put on a domestic terrorist list. And just as an aside, you know, reports are surfacing that Judge Garland's son-in-law, Xander Tanner, is the co-founder and board member and former president from 2012 to 2020 of Panorama Education, based in Boston, Massachusetts, which focuses on the woke academic agenda labeled as social emotional learning. So, and what other information and data is forthcoming or obfuscated from the DOJ with this new initiative? I guess we'll have to wait and see. So again, I just wanted to highlight that, and I did want to do a PSA because I am the chairman of the Danvers Republican Committee. I'm going to have a meeting the 27th of October at the Danvers Fire Station. So if any parent or any concerned citizen of Danvers wanted to talk about these issues, I would be more than happy to move it to the top of the agenda at the Republican Committee meeting. I thought about having a town hall style meeting, but maybe we'll just see what the interest is. So again, thanks for your time. Oh,
Thank you.
and one last thing.
Mhm.
I have copies of what I just said, so I'll just leave it right here if anybody wants a copy.
That's fine.
Thank you.
I think from our perspective, we're always happy to have people come and speak as long as they are, I guess you'd say, civil and appropriate. Now, and again, I think the notion that anybody who disagrees with members of a school committee at any town, any place, are automatically considered terrorists. No, certainly not. But we have all seen examples where it gets beyond mere argument and it gets to intimidating. And when people do start to say things like, I know where you live, that sort of stuff, I think it crosses a line. That doesn't mean it's domestic terrorism, but it certainly doesn't contribute to any sort of reasonable dialogue. I think we have been generally lucky here that people who have shown up at our meetings have been reasonable and appropriate. And as long as that happens, then we want people to be able to speak up. So thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Oh, one more point. The notion of social emotional learning as being part of a woke agenda is simply incorrect. And the reason I say that is because social emotional learning, which we are invested in, really has to do with whether students are getting the supports that they need, are getting made to feel welcome in the school. It's a sort of a broad topic, but there's plenty of evidence to indicate that it's actually very good educationally. Test scores in Texas, of all places, went up when they included social emotional learning components. So we're invested in it. I hope we'll continue to invest in it, and we believe it's good for our students.
So out of curiosity, since you, I was ready to go, but does Danvers do any business with the Panoramic Education Center out of Boston? Do we use their data to service?
No, we don't.
Very good.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zubrick.
Thank you, Eric.
Mhm.
Does this thing work?
It does.
Okay.
We can hear you fine. The people at home, I think we can hear them fine. Can you guys?
It's mostly for TV.
Yeah, people at home can hear you as well. Yep.
The voice level at the TV was very low
Oh.
always, so. Oh, I hate this thing, but hey, if you insist, then you insist.
We insist.
Well,
You insist.
a man could be-
School committee and the education department, I'm referring back to the August 23rd, 2021 school committee meeting. And at that meeting, there were promises made that there was going to be a parent survey as to the was to be conducted regarding the wearing of masks. And we've had a discussion prior to the meeting that I'm concerned and I'm wondering who is really running the school department. Because at that time, there was a promise of a vote, never happened because you expected the Board of Education to make the announcement the following day, and they did. So I'm just wondering, what influence does this school committee have on the public education of our children in Danvers? Because every time I turn around and speak to anyone from the school department, it is dictated by the Board of Education. It is dictated by somebody else. So I'm just concerned that, are we a free school system, or are we slaves to the Board of Education? The school committee declined to vote at that time, voted not to vote, which was very appropriate because they expected that. A presentation was made by many residents, or a few residents at least, and really there was no response from the school committee. We sent, or I know I've sent, emails raising my concern in regard to what was going on. And I did receive a response from the chairman, But the thing that the response was more of an attack on the messenger and very little response to the message. No wonder the residents are afraid to present issues. This is my concern, because when I come to a meeting, I expect somebody to listen to it. And the thing is that we need that communication with the residents of Danvers, not just the parents, not just the students. This is a community school, so it's the entire town. But the thing that I'll go back to a message that I've already presented on my show. Parents revolt against progressive education crisis. America's very future is at serious risk, and not just from enemies abroad, but also from dedicated internal forces that seek to replace the constitutional government with an authoritarian and anti-Western regime. And I know what you're going to tell me, I'm political, but that's the way I am. Parents send their children to school to gain an education. Most hardworking, dedicated teachers want to provide that education. Unfortunately, a substantial portion of education bureaucrats and progressive faculty leaders have a wholly different agenda. Replacing the basics has been a strident push to progressive, as they shove propaganda down the throats of students. The drive originated in universities, but now infects every level from the kindergarten to postgraduate level. Now, I know in your response, Mr. Chairman, that CRT was being taught at the law schools. Yeah, that was 40 years ago. And now it's being brought into the public schools of our communities. So just to reiterate what Mr. Morose mentioned, I'd like to raise that question again, because this is something that's happening in our schools, and I've noticed it from the students that I deal with and from my own children when they attended the school. So there is a indoctrination that's happening, and it's a follow the leader indoctrination. So that's my point, and I am going to continue on my show with this dissertation. But my other question was, and I understand that it's going to be discussed later, is the Mcas scores and the whole program that we have instituted in our school system. Because we've had issues raised 3, 4, 5 years ago, and they're continuing again, because I noticed with the scores that have been presented in the state web page, I think those need a lot of explanation. Thank you.
Would anyone care to respond?
I just think it's important to clarify, because CRT can mean two different things. CRT does refer to critical race theory, which is taught in colleges, some colleges. CRT also refers to culturally responsive teaching, and that's used a lot as far as in K through 12th grade, and that basically is you are teaching every kid, regardless of their learning style, their religion, their socioeconomic background. It's best teaching practices to make sure every kid succeeds. So I just want to clarify, CRT also refers to culturally responsive teaching. And when we use that term, that is what we are referring to.
Let me make a couple of comments. First of all, as to the parent survey, I did decide that we would hold off on that, frankly, because we don't know where the DESE is going on, potentially going next. And so the right time, it seems to me, to do the parent survey is when we know that the DESE is going to turn the control over to us, because that's the time when we know what our options are going to be. That's the time to get the parent input in terms of what the community is looking at in terms of those options. Right now, we don't have any options beyond what the DESE's mask mandate is. It's continuing at the moment. So when I want to get the parent survey in is when it won't be outdated by the time we get it back.
Well, at that time when this survey was promised, it was in relation to the mask mandate, because you do have the authority to relieve that mask mandate, because this is it's a recommendation, it's not a law. So I don't know, I'm not a legal expert.
Clearly,
You may be, but I don't believe that that's what's true.
it is a mandate. But anyway, as far as, and we did talk for a minute before the meeting, as far as, the rhetorically about whether or not schools are as the districts, are we slaves? Do we look? Public schools, there is a structure to them. There are things, for example, that we have a great deal of control over, which is the way in which we teach to the standards. We can choose math curricula, we can choose English curricula, we can choose the curricula that we feel allows us to best educate our students. But by the same token, the state can mandate the frameworks to which we need to teach. And so we decide how it's taught, we decide what materials are used. So in many areas of education, there are mandates that are put in place by DESE, and in some cases by the federal government. And every school district, I think, in the country has to deal with some of this. There are very few schools, unless you're a private school, then maybe you can do exactly what you want in every case. But for public schools, where funding is public, some of it from the federal government, some of it through the state, there are, in fact, chains of command to some extent on some things. So it's a collaborative thing between the local government, the state government, and in some cases, the federal government. It's not about slavery or who's in charge. School committees can hire superintendents. We control policy. We control the budget. So I think it's a rhetorical overstatement to say it's either this or that. Very few things are either this or that. And in terms of your discussion about the parent revolt, okay, I'm not going to say it's just political, but that's your impression of what's happening. And that's fine. You have every right with the forum that you have and to come here and talk about it. And I certainly respect your belief. In terms of my email response to you, I did not intend it as an attack. But the fact that I differ with you doesn't prevent me from saying it. The only thing that I would say I wanted you to understand was the public reaction to your comment about the what you called COVID, how you referred to COVID. And we did get some complaints about that. If that was controversial to tell you that, or if that somehow you felt was an attack on you, I thought you should know to some extent how the public took that, at least some members. But certainly didn't intend an attack. And like I say, we invite people to come and speak. That doesn't mean that if, any of us have issue with what's said, we can't engage back in a reasonable discussion. So, but thank you for coming here tonight, Mark. You're always welcome. Jim, Sam. Anyone else with public comment? No. Okay. So moving on, Lisa. Normally it would be what? Information from the
From our student rep,
but
and
she's ill.
unfortunately, Lil is sick today. So we have Mr. Federico, our high school principal, has been in communication with Lil and has our student representative report. And while Mr. Federico is here, we've asked Mr. Crane if we could move up another high school recognition for our superintendent's academic excellence award. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Federico.
You're welcome. Back to the future moment for me. I was my high school committee student rep, so I'll be glad to step into this role again briefly.
Wow.
So Lil wanted me to emphasize that a number of clubs and activities are now starting up. We had activity fairs for each grade level during our community block in the last few weeks. As you know, we have a big focus this year on making sure that our school is a respectful environment in which all students feel welcome. So she wanted to emphasize that the Anti-Discrimination Club, PRISM, mock trial, student council, student governments, those are all starting up and looking for participants and any interested students. We're going to be continuing our Why You Matter campaign, which is sort of a chance to recognize that our school is made up of all students, staff, faculty, community members like yourself. And we have a picture of everyone that's displayed around the school, and we'll be reaching out to new people to involve them with that. And then this week, today, we began our annual Kindness Week in conjunction with the Kindness for Colleen Ritzer campaign. Today, our entire school, we watched a short documentary about Colleen, kind of motivating students to participate in acts of kindness. And that will go on all week. We have different things planned each day where students will think about individual acts of kindness they can carry out, group acts with their community meeting group. And then on Friday, we have a whole school activity outside to end the week that we're excited about. So those are just a few things from our student rep that that Lil wanted highlighted for tonight. So that's the report from the student rep.
Thank you, Adam. And please express to Lila we hope she's feeling better soon.
Will do.
Thank you. Okay, so next we have our annual Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents Certificate of Academic Excellence. And this is in recognition of a student that's in the top 5% of their class. And then the school gets to choose the student. We look at the selection from a student that represents our core values and our vision. So looking at a student that's fully engaged and invested in their learning, personal responsibility for learning. And when leaving Danvers High School as a graduate of Danvers High School, will feel confident and well prepared and achieve their definition of success. So our recipient for this year is Chase Cadiosis, and Mr. Federico is going to tell you more about Chase's accomplishments.
Thank you. So it's very exciting to be here tonight to talk a little bit about Chase. He brings a tremendous amount of contributions to our community and to our school, and I'm really pleased and proud to highlight some of those. Chase is a budding musician, alto sax, I believe, member of our band, our jazz band. He is also a athlete at our school, member of the cross country team and the track team. He also has community service involvement, including with the organization Home Base, which helps those service members struggling with PTSD. And then, oh, by the way, his course load this year, AP Physics, AP Psych, AP Calculus, AP Spanish, and AP Literature. So in his spare time,
Wow.
he takes care of the academics too. So it's really with great pleasure that we have Chase here tonight to honor him. He's really representative of, I think, our high quality student body here at Danvers High School. So
So
Chase,
congratulations.
congratulations.
Peter, could you take a picture too?
See your face.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then, also the class that will be displayed is outside of the library at the high school. Chase's name for 2021. Thank you.
Comments from the committee?
Congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, I think knowing what the last 3 years was like for you, and having this recognition, I think, is extra special. So congratulations.
Can I just ask you a question? So I read a lot about how sleep is important. How does that work for you? Great job.
Congratulations, Chase, and Mom and Dad, I'm sure you have been supportive and are most proud. So thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to move into our COVID statistics and next steps. I was going to say, if you want to stay, you're welcome to, but if you'd rather go home and watch the Red Sox, go to it.
And you need to supervise, right?
There you go.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. All right, Lisa, our COVID statistics and next steps.
Thank you. Just taking one moment to get the presentation up there, and Mr. Taverna will be leading this part of our meeting with this presentation.
So as it loads for school committee, if you go to slide 48 in the presentation that's linked, is the slide where we'll begin. I think so. Slide 48 for the community at home is about our health and safety measures, and just reminding the community about what remains our primary reminders of hand washing, mask wearing, and staying home while sick. And that's really one point that we want to highlight, is that for families to refer to our family COVID information sheet. There's a lot of information there about which symptoms require you to stay home and get a COVID test, and which symptoms you can come to school with. So a reminder to please stay home when you're not feeling well. Jump to our next slide. So since our last meeting, we have had 5 weeks in between. So you'll see that we have 5 sets of data. I would like to highlight on this first slide, as it loads at the bottom square, we have added some additional information. So we started to count the number of students who are being quarantined and the number of students who are in the test and stay program, so we can track that. Students who are quarantined could be students that have tested positive themselves, or a student who has had to remain home from an outside of school-based exposure. Should it be an activity that's outside of school, or a parent that may have tested positive. So for the week of 9/17, we had 55 total cases across the town of Danvers, with 11 of those in the schools. A 2.75% positivity rate, and 24% of the cases and students under the age of 18, with 73% of Danvers being vaccinated. You'll see at the bottom we had 44 students in test and stay that week, and 12 students in that quarantine receiving remote support. If we go to 9/24, you'll see we had 49 cases, 13 in the schools, with a 3% positivity rate, 35% of the cases in students under 18, a slight increase in the overall vaccination rates to 74%, along with 45 students in test and stay. And then this is where we really started tracking the data. So you'll see a 0 here for students quarantined. We just did not have accurate data for that given week, but from the week of 10/1 on, we do have accurate data for each of the week to start watching trends. So for the week of 10/1, you'll see this is where Danvers kind of hit their peak. This is actually where the state started to come down. So what we saw when we watched the data locally is the Danvers peak was actually about 2 weeks after where the state was, and now we started to see the downward trend in these past 2 weeks. But there was 77 cases townwide, 15 cases in the school with a 3.15% positivity rate, 31% of the cases in students under the age of 18, with 39 students receiving that short-term remote support. So those students in quarantine are the ones that are receiving the support that we went through at our last school committee meeting. So we had 39 students and 65 students in the test and stay program. If we go to the week of 10/8, we had 62 cases townwide, 17 in the schools, a 3.99% positivity rate, 35% of the cases in students under the age of 18, continued to have 74% of the town fully vaccinated, and then 32 students receiving the remote support, and 28 students in test and stay. So the weeks of 10-1 and 10-8 were really our peak weeks up to this point. And then you'll see last week ending 10-15, we had 58 cases with 8 cases in the schools, a 4.35% positivity rate, 26% of the cases in students under the age of 18, along with a 74% vaccination rate, and then 27 students receiving the short-term medical support and 32 students in the test and stay. To date for this week, and our period will end Wednesday, we've had 3 cases this week. So we've hopefully seen the peak for this fall surge, and hopefully the numbers continue to come down. So you can see that in test and stay, we've had, approximately 200 students, and we have had 2 cases of school-based spread that we've been able to track back. So we're happy to report that's not a perfect number, right? We would hope that it would be 0, but out of all of that test and stay data, we've only had 2 cases where students have come back positive. So I think it shows the strength of the protocols that we do have in place, along with the program of test and stay being successful for when those mitigation methods are in place during the school day. So I'll pause there for any quick questions about the data, and then we're going to jump into the latest DESE release a few weeks ago about the extension of the mask mandate, as well as some of the local vaccination data.
Arthur, questions?
I'm good. Thank you.
Anyone down the line, Alex?
I do. For school transmission, it's just if a student was in test and stay and tested positive, so they could have gotten it from someone or something else, they would still be considered this as a school transmission, correct? Okay, and there's only
we
been
really
2.
tried to dive down into the detail to make
Right.
sure that we find the points of exposure. So we know, let's say lunch could be a point of exposure. So we really tried to track back. And the first case of this in-school transmission, it was 2 students that we found weren't following our safety protocols as we would have wished that they had, and that's where the spread came from. And then the second case was just a true in-school. We couldn't fully pin down where that might have been. The students ate lunch together. They sat next to each other in the class in multiple classes.
Okay.
So that one was less, I guess, more ambiguous.
Yes, right. Okay. I could see what you were trying to do with the data, so thank you. That makes sense.
It just seemed like a couple of the weeks that certain schools had a lot of kids who tested positive. I didn't know if that was due to, it looked like a lot of kids because maybe that elementary school particular was like larger than the others, or if there's something that maybe another elementary school is doing that maybe the other ones could be doing to try to, slow the process.
So
I don't know the answer
right,
to that.
there was one school at the elementary level that did have more cases than the others. Again, as we did our contact tracing, we didn't see any school-based spread from that. So to us, it's not indicative of something going on in the school. It's just a happenstance of they had a little surge in that community, and thankfully that's now leveled off and they're back on the same level. So not really sure why, but don't think it has to do with what the school's doing any different than the other schools.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff?
No questions, thanks.
Okay. Real quickly, Keith, so really the number of cases in the school peaked the week of 10-8 with 17, and then dropped quite a bit last week. Now, a couple of other notes. So it looks like the town vaccination rate has leveled off at about 74%, been there for a month. So that may be as good as it gets because, the vaccines are available to everybody. The vaccines are, it seems to me anybody who wants to be vaccinated at this point probably is. So that may be where we top out. The question I had is as the town numbers went down to some extent, 10-1, 10-8, 10, the positive test rate actually went up. And do we have any sense of that? Was it simply that more people who got tested came back positive, or less people tested overall? Do we know what's behind that interesting trend?
So the number of overall tests have come down in
Okay.
that time period, which aligns with what we're seeing statewide if you look at the data for the number of tests. Again, I would say that the state peaked somewhere around 924 and then kind of came down, but it seems like our test rates came down even though our data still hadn't peaked for the number of cases. So if you looked at it kind of the way that the state was growing, I would say that the numbers for the weeks of, let's say, September 1st through September 24th, our numbers were almost artificially lower than the rest of the state as they saw the growth and then they peaked. And so Danvers was just kind of behind for 2 weeks, but the overall testing numbers are down, which
Okay.
has caused the positivity rate to go up.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
obviously, we still, right, if a day was here in the public health department, they would say, please still go get tested, because the more people that get tested, the more you know that COVID is out there, the more you can suppress the spread if people know. So we still encourage, parents, and that's what we continue to share through our nurses, is that when they have those symptoms as outlined in that family COVID information sheet, to please make sure they're adhering to that.
We don't really take public comment, but if I will make an exception once, but go to the microphone, Mark, so public can hear you.
The question I have is, yeah, the statistics are going down. However, how do you prevent false positives? Or do you test the second time to, verify it? Or is it just one test and that's it?
In the Test and Stay program, students are tested for 5 straight school days to ensure that the results are in a rapid antigen format. For students that are symptomatic, they have to get a PCR test, which has the higher reliability in the positivity rate, the integrity, the accuracy. Thank you. I was blanking on the accuracy of the test with the PCR is higher than the rapid test. So students are required to get a PCR test to ensure that reliability.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we'll jump into the latest guidance that came from DESE. If you can just go to the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Nope, yep, it's. So I think you're in.
Oh, my presenter mode. Oh, sorry.
Present. Yep, nope, that's.
There you go.
Okay. So the mask mandate was extended until November 1st. We are waiting for more information from the commissioner if that was going to get extended again. As of October 15th, and I believe at this point there's 2 schools across the state that have met this threshold. If a school has met an 80% threshold of vaccination, including staff and students, that school can opt out of the mask mandate with support from local administration, the local board of health, and a school committee vote. Unvaccinated students are continued to be required to wear masks in that circumstance. The 80% threshold is calculated on a school-by-school basis. So this is where we talked about that voluntary data collection at the start of the year, and we've been putting out weekly reminders to our middle school and high school families and students, as well as to our staff, to collect that data. So it is collected building to building, not based on the data that the state releases. Schools should determine that method. So for us, it's been the voluntary collection of vaccine cards. It has not been using the state MIS system where we could look that information up, but we're only looking that up on a need-to-know basis. So if you are deemed a close contact, we may access that information, but besides that, it is on a completely voluntary basis from staff and families. And then all the documentation should be maintained confidentially. So that information for staff is retained in my office under the same rules that we would use for HIPAA, even though it's not technically a HIPAA piece, but we follow those same rules, and then the same with the nurse and the administration. So now if we jump to the next slide, Mary, we'll look at the vaccination data rates for the statewide piece and their collection based on age. You'll see, and we'll focus on the students here. It's at 56 and 66% in Danvers. That remains unchanged from our last meeting as of 10/7. And then if we go to 10/14, again, that data remains unchanged. So that those rates have stayed constant over the course of the last 6 weeks or so. If we go to the next slide, we're going to share some data around our voluntary collection from students and staff. So you'll see as of 10/12, we've had 15% of our high school students share that they are vaccinated with us, along with 67% of high school staff, or a total of 22%. So as we're moving towards that 80% threshold as of today, the calculations are at 22%. So we encourage families to continue to share that information if they wish with us to help us inform our decision making in the future along with staff. If we jump to the next slide, Mary, this is now the middle school vaccination rates, which we would expect to be somewhat lower as kids are coming into age of being eligible. But for students, that is at 6.75%. For faculty, 65.8%, and 14.89 school-wide. And then our last slide is looking at our Danvers Public Schools staff vaccination rates. So out of our 559 staff, 375 have shared their cards, or 67.08%. We do anecdotally believe that that percentage is higher amongst our staff based on surveys that we did in the spring that were anonymous. But to date, this is what has been shared with us for vaccine cards. And we have tried to make it accessible for anybody, and despite what their concerns may be, so a staff member could have scanned their card or sent a picture to myself or Janet in my office, or if they didn't want to send it electronically due to privacy concerns, they could come to our office and show us the card. So we're really trying to remove some of those barriers to help people in what their comfort level is, but those are the percents that we're at now. So again, we encourage the community to please share their vaccination records to help us with our contact tracing, as well as making informed decisions around masking as we continue to move forward.
Questions for Keith?
I'm not following. So you have on slide 62, you have the pediatric vaccination rate in Danvers between 12 and 15 at 56%, and then age 16 to 19 at 66%. So are we to assume that demographic is not enrolled in Danvers Public Schools?
I guess I would assume that families are hesitant at this point to share their vaccination status.
So that's
with
what
us.
you're saying. Okay.
And
Right, we think we're higher than 6%, right? If the age group is at 56, we must be higher than the 6% that we've.
And so that pediatric vaccination rate is coming from where?
From the MIS system that I referred to. The
Okay.
state has access to that, and they pull data reports from it and then calculate those percentages. And I apologize if I have those letters
Nope, that's
wrong. It's the nursing system that tracks all of the vaccinations, but I might be missing. There might be two eyes.
It's wildly different, I guess. I can't wrap my head
And
around
we keep
that.
and we keep encouraging families, and it's gone in the last at least 2 or 3 weekly reminders out to families to please ask them to share with us, and there just hasn't been any traction with that to date.
So it's not really confusing. It's the fact is we know that somewhere between 56 and 66% of the kids that are at the high school are vaccinated. And what they're not doing is providing the information to the school, to the high school voluntarily that they're vaccinated. Because obviously, if the state, which has the accurate records, says that that's the amount that's vaccinated, then I think we can pretty fairly and easily extrapolate that that's what it is in the high school too.
Somewhere in that range, right? We have our
So-
students that go to the prepper to Essex Tech, but
Right, and then it would all spread out
statistically,
equal.
right.
So it's not an issue now because we're still far away from 80%, but if that state number goes up to close to 80%, then we have to look at how we're going to calculate the 80% if we get there. We may not get there. We're still 20% away. But, and then as far as the teachers, if you look at the age range, you know, it looks like in the age range for teachers, it's somewhere in the 70-75% range. It's probably the same. You probably have more teachers that have told you that they're doing it. There's probably a few more. But I think, you know, obviously those are the real stats. The real stats are what we get from the state system. The voluntary collection is just a voluntary collection.
Yet the state has made it very clear that you cannot use the information from the state as that rate of calculation for making that decision.
That's not. But I mean, I think that I think the point I'm making is it's not confusing. It is simply people aren't telling you what they're doing.
Right. I just want to make it clear, right, that it's not like if that number hits 80 from the state that we can magically say this is now official. So.
Anything else out
I'm good. Thanks.
there? Robin or Jeff?
No, I think
Nope.
Arthur said it well.
Yeah.
I don't see us
Um,
changing this unless this mandate changes anytime
Keith,
soon.
yeah, I agree. Keith and Lisa, quick question on how are our school nurses supporting the townwide effort in terms of, or are they, in terms of the contact tracing and that sort of activity?
Sure. So our nurses really serve as an extension to Judith Ryan and her staff. So Judith does have one other person that helps her with contact tracing, but when it is a case that involves a school child, we typically are the one that does 95% of the contact tracing on their behalf and sharing that information. If the student themselves has then tested positive, they often hear from Judith, but for all of the close contacts, we serve as the contact tracers for them.
Okay. I'm concerned a little bit and heard some concerns about the workload on nurses and extra hours. And is that accurate to say they're putting in extra time because of the need to do the contact tracing? And if so, how are we dealing with that?
And in the start of the year, they definitely were putting in a lot of hours. We continue to work with them to try to think of strategies of how to streamline it. You will see one development that will be upcoming sometime in the next month or so is a letter that will start to come out to students who are close contacts. So as we continue to live with COVID, and I think we're all coming to more of the realization that it's not going away tomorrow, and it's something that we're just going to need to come to terms with. How do we streamline that while not making it feel impersonal, but also moving to a more written-based method? So let's say it is on a Saturday, an email could go out to the 5 families with a follow-up phone call on Monday, or the opportunity to talk to somebody on Monday to help that work-life balance.
Okay.
Through our funding last year and through some of the grants, there was an opportunity for nurses to receive a stipend at the end of the year for the extra hours that were put in.
Okay.
And that's something that we anticipate will occur again at the end of this school year for those hours that are completed outside of the school day.
Okay, great. I had heard some talk about it. I just wanted to check in, and we'll continue to talk about it as time goes on, I'm sure.
Yep, and we've also tried to hire, we have 3 of our retired nurses who have come back to help us on a per diem basis to do some of the day-to-day paperwork to help the nurses get caught up so that they can spend more time focusing on COVID and not so much on their day-to-day logs and those types of items that the nurses can support even in a remote format where there's some paperwork that they can pick up and help the nurses with.
Sure. Well, I mean, the last couple of years have put an additional strain on all areas of healthcare, so I'm not surprised. It's, you feel it at the school nurse level, you feel it at local doctors, local hospitals. So, all right, thank you.
Eric, you made me think of a question.
I did. Well,
It's too late.
No. Keith, I know this got brought up last time about the busing. Have we had any more success? There was some concerns. I don't know when it was, but like there was the kids were coming in late because the bus issue. Like I don't know. I know this is a national crisis. I didn't know where we were as far as that went.
We've not found the magical answer to that question, but we have worked through and knock on wood, the last week or so has been much better. We haven't had anybody out, and we keep working on creative solutions. And I'm not going to share too much because it's not locked in stone, but we are trying to figure out how we get spare bus drivers to be on our staff. And it may mean, employing somebody that is with us even when they don't have to drive to look for different creative solutions to eliminate some of those challenges. But we do appreciate everyone's flexibility and patience because there were a few days that did not run how we wanted them to do, or splitting routes and getting really creative, and families have been overwhelmingly supportive of that, and we're thankful for that.
Awesome. Thank you.
I know you'll keep working on that as well. So, all right. Anyone else on anything to do with COVID? Okay. So we're going to move on to, I believe it's information from the superintendent.
Thank you very much. Our major item for this evening is our strategic plan with our annual review of curriculum, our instructional priorities, and our assessment data. We do this on an annual basis for our assessment data. So it is up there. What we are looking at too is that we would have tonight is thinking of our 3 pillars: curriculum, coherent curriculum instruction, and assessment is for this evening, and then over the next couple of months, taking the other two pillars and also being able to spend a chunk of time sharing an overview, trying to pull all the pieces together to share with you and with the community, and receive feedback as we move into each month of this school year. So Mary and I will present some slides with you, then the data and what we are working on in the curriculum and instruction. And then our 3 curriculum directors are also here this evening to be able to answer any questions from each of the specific levels. Our vision again, all of our work, sorry about that, Mary, I'm behind for one moment. Our work is always centered around our vision and talking about, for example, when Chase was here earlier in our meeting, that our students leave feeling confident, well prepared, and they go on to become productive, responsible, caring citizens of the global community and achieve their definition of success. So with that, our one of our 3 pillars, and again, engaged students is always at our center of all of our work. For coherent curriculum, instruction, and assessment, there are 3 main areas within our goals for this year, and that is develop our high impact teacher teams to use formative assessment, which is our FAR cycle, to monitor the learning of all of our students. We're focusing on elementary reading and also the implementation of our multi-tiered system of support. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mary to be able to talk about sort of the why, the data, and then what we are currently doing, and then I'll come back at the end around our portrait of a graduate and the next steps.
Great. So we presented to you in a previous meeting the goals that we have that are aligned for the coherent curriculum instruction and assessment by levels. And you'll see that we're really working on, as we talked about in a previous meeting, is the coming off of the DESE acceleration roadmap. So we're really working to reestablish our multi-tier system of support this school year, and do that with using our formative assessment data to help us know where every kid is at in their learning, so that we can make that happen, so that we can help them achieve those grade level standards, even though, you know, they had that funny last year and a half with the COVID. So you'll see each one of these goals is some kind of iteration of the reestablishing that multi-tier system of support and using the formative assessment for results kind of cycle to monitor the student data. So, so where are we headed with this? As I said, we're trying to reestablish the MTSS this school year. So we are working on that. We had a district-wide meeting last week to start that work and kick that off with our teacher leaders, or what we call them professional learning community leaders or common planning time leaders. And we'll talk more about that work later. But I think what we're going to do is kind of frame this, like, where have we been? Like, what were we doing prior to what happened with the pandemic? Kind of looking at the data that came out of the pandemic, and then moving forward, what's the more specific work that we're doing in the area of curriculum instruction and assessment, okay? So where we were in 2019 and 2020, we were going pretty strong with putting in the multi-system of supports. We realized that we really needed to meet the needs of the range of learners in our classroom. We knew we were working okay with the middle set of kids, but really working at helping the students that needed more support, and then also really working on the higher end students that needed acceleration. So we started doing that. We had gone to a few conferences. We were really getting traction with really putting actions into place. Coming off a couple of meetings in January and February of 2020, then March 2020 happened, and that kind of came to a halt, because then we had to think about how do we start instruction fully remote with students. But prior to to September 2019, we really focused on our teachers, because our teachers make the biggest impact on our students. So we really worked on them in their common planning times meeting, really being high impact teacher teams. So what are the high impact teaching strategies that we can use with students to really move their learning and move their achievement along? So that had been started prior to that school year. And in that work, we really focused on formative assessments, because we have there's a lot of researchers out there that talk about, there's lots of different data that's external data, like the summative data, like the Mcas. Then you have your summative unit data that like the chapter tests that your teachers give, or the mid-year final data. But then also we have the data that's really close to you, is in the classroom, and knowing where the kids are at every day, and are they meeting what objectives and purposes you're setting out in each lesson. Are they following along with you as you move along the learning trajectory? So that's kind of what we were working on before pre-pandemic. So where are we now? So we're going to jump into the student achievement, our external assessments, and kind of looking at that. So we're going to go from the high school down. So from our high school data, we have AP is one source of data for our older students. So in 2017, 2018, 2019, you'll see the total number of AP students above a 3, scoring 3, 4, or 5, held pretty steady in the like the low to mid 70s, 73, 72, 72. And then when we hit 2020, this is kind of the next 2 years are anomalies, right? Because in 2020, in the spring, had to have online tests. We weren't in school, so they modified the AP tests. They shortened them down to just a few questions that were like constructed response type questions. So students took that, and you'll see that, and that with having that modified test, our students did very well on their AP exams. And then when you hit 2021 last year, the AP test went back to being in person and the full test. But we had that pandemic, the hybrid year of learning, and students had an opt-out option. That's the school year, so they didn't have to. Normally, when they take an AP test and an AP course in Danvers, they have to take the AP test. So this year they did have an opt-out option. So when you look at the total number of students, if you look in the top row, you can see, we were in the 200s here. There was a drop-off in 2020 during the pandemic, and then when they were fully remote, and then when there was an option of whether you take it or not, the 187 students took AP tests. So you can see that those numbers show the differences there. All right, so this year we're back, though. We're back to requiring students to take tests. They're being fully in person, just as we did. So we're back to kind of a normal trajectory. So then we move into the PSAT and SAT data. So last year, again, with the hybrid model, we chose just to test 11th grade students with PSATs. So these are our numbers. We had 150 Danvers High students taking that test, and our PSAT scores were close to the state mean. At the SAT data, you can see that our test takers again went down. And so what's happened in the pandemic, a lot of colleges made that exception that we're test optional. And many students have taken that to heart, that they didn't take the SAT tests as much as they have had in the past, because prior to this, SAT was the driver of admissions into college. And then now you can start to see that trend waning a little bit. So we had 58 students take the AP tests. So those are our scores. We are close to, about an average score here in Danvers. And then if you look at national scores, Massachusetts is always much higher than the average scores of the rest of the country because of our academic standings that we have in Massachusetts. Moving on to Danvers High with Mcas data. There's 2 tests right now because we're slowly transitioning science over to what they call the next generation Mcas test. So we are taking the next generation. That means the computer-based tests in grade 10 in English language arts and math. We did that this year. And again, you'll see that our results are close to being at the state average, where the anomaly here is in the grade 10 mathematics, where we are below the state average. And this is the cohort that has come up through the middle school that has been struggling in math. This is actually a higher score that are meeting or exceeding expectations. And if you look back at the cohort through the middle school, they were in the 30% of students meeting or exceeding. So that's that data. The 9th grade, as I said, the biology test is legacy, and those scores have been remaining pretty steady for science. If you might wonder about the the competency determination for students and what they need to pass for the next few years. The current class of 2022, they are that one of those classes that was affected by the pandemic. So they are a course completion if they did not make because they did not take the MCAS test. So they're a course completion, and Peter gets to upload that data up to the state of Massachusetts. So that they're tests. They're a class that does not have to pass the MCAS for that. In 2023, though, they did take the MCAS test as 10th graders. So only the biology is going to be waived, like that course completion, and then they need to be passing the ELA and mathematics tests to get the competency determination. So so that's happening, and then in 2024 we're back to normal. All tests need to be passed to earn the competency determination. So that is the high school. Now, 3 through 8, there was a little different landscape for the MCAS test. Now, because of the competency determination, high school went forward with the full testing last year. But this year, we did not have a full administration. So the last time the 3 through 8 MCAS test was given in full was in the school year 2018 and 2019. So there were no tests in 1920. And then last year they were modified, and they used a sampling approach where students were randomly assigned one out of 2 sections on the MCAS test. So all students in 3 through 8 took half the MCAS test. There were 2 different modes of testing. Some students took it in person. The kids that were in our hybrid model or in our full in person by the time they came back, they were in our full in person model in May. And the students that were fully remote got to take the test fully remote. So finally, I was just going to say that the results of the MCAS are based on sampling, and they're not a full test. So in the letter that the Department of Ed sent home to parents around the MCAS test, they talk about that difference that is really the diagnostic test is what they want to have parents understand, to like kind of give us a dipstick of where their kids are at, but that it's not until they aggregate up the test results up to a group of students that they really are that valid measure. So they just want to remind parents that this is because they only took half that test, that there might be wider variability in the results in an individual basis versus as an aggregated up to a school. So that's the little caveat that they put out, and they put it out. I'll show you on another slide. They make another statement about that later. So when we look at the MCAS scores, grades 3 through 8, I thought we'd start with like the average scale score. So the scale score range goes from 440 to 560. So when we look at our results for spring of 21, all our we're right there we're at the state average. Some of them are a little bit higher than the state average, and then there are 4 that are slightly below the average. So grade 6 and 8 ELA, 6 and 8 math are areas that we were struggling in. And then when you dig deeper into the percent of students at meeting or exceeding expectations, the same thing plays out, that the areas that we struggle with are grade 6 and 8 math, ELA, and 6 and 8 math. I do highlight for you the percent of students not meeting expectation on this, because I'll come back to that in a little bit, that we had a large percentage of students not participating in the MCAS test in spring of 2021 at those 2 grade levels. So those were the ELA scores. The top gray box is exceeding standards, the middle box is meeting standards, the light blue box is partially meeting, and then the lighter gray box is not meeting expectations. And then it goes left to right, grade 3 ELA, grade 4 ELA, grade 5 ELA, grade 6, 7, and 8. And then we move to math. Same thing, 3 to 8, left to right. The top is exceeding. The dark gray, the darker blue is meeting expectations. The light blue is partially meeting expectations. And then the gray is not meeting it. So here's that slide about the participation. When you start to look at the percentage of kids that participated in the MCAS in Danvers, 98 in grade 3, 95 in grade 4, 98 in grade 5. When you hit grade 6, we had 89% of students taking the test. The grade 7 is back up to 97, 95, and then grade 8 is down to 83. And then grade 9 and 10 is back up to 99 and 98. Again, that's because I think of the competency determination that kids need to pass that to graduate. So we did have some letters from families saying that the students were opting out of this assessment, and that's why they didn't come. They didn't come to the school that day. They were, when the parents get their score reports home, it will say not tested absent, and that's what the report will say for them. So again, from DESE, they say the participation rates varied across schools, districts, and student groups in 2021 more than in prior years. If the participation rate in 2021 was lower than in prior years, the results may have been different if more students had taken the test. So, so those were just something that we have to keep an eye on. We might need to, work, hope that some of the families participate back into the MCAS, but again, it was their decision last year to opt out of that test. Not all the people in not meeting were opt-outs, but it was significant number of students that were. And then getting to our science scores, now remember, science only is given one time in elementary school and one time in middle school and one time in high school. So the elementary is at grade 5, and they were like 38% meeting or exceeding standards or expectations, and they were even with the state, and then I think they were even with the state, and then 8th grade science was at 48%, which was above the state average. So that was our MCAS data, and now we, coming as we move into what we're looking at for next school year, we've been looking at the grade 2 reading data, and I think we shared this with you in the June meeting, kind of where we were at with this, that we had grade 2 is one of our measures in the strategic plan, and we had a trajectory to try to get to our final goal in June of 2023, where we have 90% of second graders reading on benchmark or at grade level. And so our real data, as you can see in the middle of January 2020, we were at 70.61% that were at or above grade level. Then when we go to the beginning of the year in September 2020, after the full remote portion of in the pandemic, we entered school at 53.56% of students that were reading at or above grade level. As we hit mid-year, we saw the improvement to 59%, and then by the end of the year, 59.77%. Reading at or above grade level. So now we're on that path, and we've assessed students for the beginning of the year. We have that data and know where they are, and we're working now. We're hoping that we can jump them from that 60% meeting at being at above grade level and moving them up to 80%. Again, we're working on that acceleration. We took the ESSER money that some of that ESSER money to put in reading specialists to really help work with small groups of students to really improve their reading levels over the next 2 years. So we also had other measures that were based on MCAS, so that we put together this table. We had done that in past years of saying where we are. And so we have, at grade 2, we've reported to you that we're at like 60% at or above grade level reading. At grade 5, we are at 52% of our students scoring meeting or exceeding standards. At grade 6 in ELA, we're at 42% of our students meeting and exceeding standards, where we're looking for 60% in 2 more years. In grade 8 math, we're only at 22%. This is, they struggled. They've been struggling for the last couple of years on that math test. And then by grade 10, we want 90% of students. We actually based these 90 and 96% rates back in 2017 when we were in 2018 when we were doing the legacy MCAS test. So if you remember correctly, we always had kids in the 90s. We were always scoring in the 90th and 90th percentile. So maybe a little lower in the higher 80s in mathematics, but now we're into the next generation with the computer-based test, which is a very different test. So that is skewed a little bit off. You can even see the state themselves, who are always in the 90 percentile bracket, are down at 52 for math and then 64 at ELA. So those are our current measures on our strategic plan goals. So now to go in to talk to you about what we are doing in curriculum instruction and assessment, why we are reestablishing, why are we reestablishing the MTSS? As you know, as we come off that pandemic learning, that students are in different varying places in their learning. So we're trying to really assess where they are by using that formative assessment data and really kind of pushing them forward, or trying to, as DESE has been talking to us about, is accelerating their learning. They've found that remediation hasn't worked. In fact, the more you remediate a kid, the further behind they stay, and they never actually catch up to their grade level. So they want us, in trying to accelerate students, focus on three things: fostering a sense of belonging and partnership among students and families, continuously monitor students' understanding, and ensuring strong grade appropriate instruction with just-in-time scaffolds when they're needed. And so that number 3 and number 2 are really the multi-tier system of support kind of framework we're trying to put in. So how are we doing the sense of belonging? We're really focused on relationship building. So these are some texts that we've been using with teachers and their professional learning to really strengthen those relationships with kids and with families and foster that sense of identity of who those kids are in their classrooms. And then not going beyond that, I feel like this slide really helps us think about how do we connect that with academics. So, I really like the first quote, like, relationship setting is just the first stage. A trusting relationship is the on-ramp to the kind of cognitive, high-level problem solving and high-order thinking we want students to do. So that's where we're in now, is transitioning from, we've done this work on relationship building and really trying to take it to lift that cognitive level. And that's where, kicking off our work on Thursday, that's where we started to reestablish the multi-tier system support and the formative assessment work we've been doing in our classrooms. The continuously monitoring students' understanding, that's our formative assessment work. And this is like the cycle that we follow to monitor their understanding. So we set, number 1 is like setting the learning goals that you have for kids. What's the objective of the lesson? And what is the criteria for success? 2 is that you use those formative assessments to decide if they're able to actually meet the goal that you set out for them in the lesson. Analyzing them so you can, that number 3 is you analyze them so as a teacher you know what you need to do with those students. And 4 is to take firm action. That means you decide, do you need to pull a student over just to give them some feedback? Do you need to reteach a smaller group of kids? Do you need to excel some kids? Or is the data good and we could just move on to the next standard? So that's kind of the work that we've been doing, and just to give you a picture of what that looks like. And then the third priority from DESE is ensuring a strong grade appropriate instruction. So that's these curriculums that we use. These are some high quality curriculums that the Department of Education is like pushing us to look at. And then finally, to really have that just-in-time scaffolds when they're needed. And that's what we started to work on, is that multi-tier system of support. So we do a lot of work with a company called Research for Better Teaching. We call it RBT. They do our induction program. We do the Foundations in Teaching course their first year. The second year is a Skillful Teaching course. It starts tomorrow in Danvers for our second-year teachers. And then we have a class for professional status teachers, and it's called High Expectations Teaching. And it's really, it kind of pulls together all the principles that the DESE is, the 3 priorities that DESE is looking at. And it really helps us to hold all our kids to high expectations by having rigorous learning assessments, and then also making sure that we're culturally proficiently and we're reaching all the students that we are teaching. So, and the premise for RBT is that working together, all 3 of them can help close those gaps. So it's kind of the work that we've been doing. As I said last Thursday, we started with our district, we call it the MTSS Data Leadership Team. So all teacher leaders at the elementary, middle, and high school level got together. They planned their school-based data meetings and their common planning time work, and they're going to go back and work with in the PLCs or the common planning time groups to get that work going. The next meeting is in January 2022, and we're going to be checking in then on how that assessment work is going, and then really zeroing in on small group differentiated instruction. The other thing that I think you probably hear me say formative assessment over and over, and you're like, what is she, what does this look like? So I just wanted to show you a couple ways of the ways we collect data around this. Every group has something different that they do based on their discipline. The top is Go Formative is one of the a computer app that we have that we use on the Chromebooks, where teachers can collect real-time data on the computer, and this helps. You can see the stoplight highlighting to identify kids that are struggling or that may need a little extra help. You can also see to the right up by the Danvers logo, you can see this is called Common Lit. This is an ELA assessment that kids took, and it's showing you how many attempts they had to take to answer the question, or if Red was not answering the question correctly. So the teacher can look quickly and know who needs some help with that. Science is the Google Sheet. Many groups keep a Google Sheet of like improvement students are taking, or keeps their data organized in a spreadsheet. And then down below is our new math program, Carnegie, which is the dashboard that they have on this Mathia that helps, where the students are taking formative assessments on the computer and then able to see that work. And then finally, the template is the actual common planning time meeting and the work that they did in that common planning time meeting. So what are we doing next? We are working on the data analysis on our common planning time with the administrative team. We're looking at the opt-out numbers and participation rates, and we're looking at cohort data. Math, we have started implementing a new mathematics program at the middle school. It's grades 6, 7, and 8. It's Carnegie Math. It's part of the Department of Ed's Math Acceleration Program. So we have a grant with them to purchase the supplies, the materials, which is great. And Algebra 2 is also using that program. So with that adoption in middle school and then at Algebra 2, Carnegie also allowed our Algebra 1 teachers to have access to all the resources for teaching Carnegie, and the teachers are piloting some of the lessons this school year with our hopes to start adopting next school year. So, and then finally, we're really working on that portrait of graduate. So there's just not academic results that we're looking at, but we're also looking at those 21st century learning skills that might help, that actually students rely on when they get out and go into college. And so, for example, just to give you a picture of what this might look like, if we look back at our vision statement, 3 words that jump out at you are responsibility, global citizen, and caring and empathy. So if those are some of the criteria that we want to see or measure what students are doing in those areas, here's some areas where we currently have projects going on and data that we can gather. So the responsibility is like some of the DECA projects that the kids have and a lot of the community work that they're doing. The global citizen, we have civic projects that are that the state requires us to do at grade 8 and then also at high school. And we also have in the global citizen civics units that we're using in the at the elementary level. And then in the caring and empathy, we have the social emotional learning skills that we've been working on. Holt Richmond is implementing what they call the PAIR survey that we talked about, I think, at our last meeting, and really helping get a sense of what those skills look like at the middle school. And then Danvers High has a community block, and they have some assessments as well that they're kind of measuring student participation on. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you, and I want to thank Mary for that presentation of pulling all of that data together. And again, as Mary said, the ending of our vision statement is that our students go on to become productive, responsible, caring citizens of the global community and achieve their definition of success. So Mary was giving a couple examples of the types of areas that we can be including additional data along with the external data that we have at the state level. Some of the flexibility here in looking at the next steps with our portrait of a graduate work that we wanted to do in 1920. We're not able to do it last year with the pandemic, and then looking at this school year. We had been consulting with an organization called Transcend through our work with our Essex County learning community. Unfortunately, it seems like the same as with other staffing pieces that they are booked right through July of 2022 is the first that they could work with us. So at this moment, and we'll come back at November, we would like to switch the order of having a district council come back to come together first and we will come together, put the format together for that, and then seek our community members, parents, along with our DPS students and personnel, put that out for December, start the district council in the January timeframe, and the examples that Mary had up there to be able to provide some case studies to be able to really set the foundation, continue to reestablish our community partnerships with our families, with the community, and then be able to work with Transcend. I do have an email from our executive director from our Essex County Learning, and she will continue to look at it. If there are other consultants that she could present to us to see if they might be able to. So there is an opportunity that we could speed this up if we do look at working with another consultant. But that is the update. And again, we appreciate, as Keith said, with COVID, our management and operations, working through a pandemic, and with our teaching and learning as we move forward and to try to continue to build on our community partnerships, the patience and the flexibility as we pull all of this together. So thank you for, and we know that was a longer presentation than what we normally do. It really pulls together that whole pillar of a coherent curriculum and instruction and assessment that we wanted to present this evening.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Start with the questioning with Jeff.
Sure, thanks. So I guess, I look at the numbers, and obviously MCAS is kind of all over the place this year. I don't know how much stock I would put into it, to be quite honest, given the low number of, representative samples we had, the time we had to teach, everything that happened this year. I think, the 81% down to this year, I think is unique. But maybe I missed it before, but, this is the first year I've really noticed tangible goals for MCAS progress, in particular on slide 18, right? So I just want to make sure I'm understanding this one goal correctly. By the end of grade 8, 60% of students will score at meeting or exceeding standards on grade 8 math MCAS test, correct?
Mm-hmm.
We're currently at 22,
Right.
and we want to get to 60.
Right, we weren't there though in the spring of 18, we weren't at that level.
Right.
Or 17 when we set the goal.
Okay. So based on all of the programs and MTSS and what we've got now, is it still realistic to get to 60% in some short amount of time?
In 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to get there. But we're hoping that we want to see an improvement, and we started to see an improvement. You remember the middle school had the accountability status of needing assistance in 2018, coming off the spring of 2018 MCAS scores. So we put together a plan, and we started implementing that plan. And by implementing that plan, we were able to get off the accountability status. So, and we had the status of not needing the assistance again, but that didn't stop us. Like we weren't, and that was like, I look back at the slides to start this slideshow, and it's like, we made progress, but we're not done. And that's what we're obviously at the middle school, we're knowing that. And we started that year looking into new math programs and trying to find one that fit, with our strategic plan and what we want for students and what would fit with Danvers. So we've looked over lots of different programs. We took a whole year to do that, and then this year are implementing that program.
Okay. Because I looked at this and I was just about to just start to paraphrase Art in his previous years and say, look, MCAS, as far as teaching doesn't, kind of doesn't, matter in terms of this. The state's all over the place with their metrics.
Right.
The formative assessments, in my mind, are a much better predictor of how students are really doing and are they learning.
Yeah.
And so to have a lot more numbers, I think in particular for parents and caregivers, to see those sorts of metrics versus an MCAS score, which shows, your student might or might not be here. I do appreciate the value of being able to compare across the state. Massachusetts is a great competitive state. We have great schools, so you're doing well, which is fine in some cases. But the formative assessments are really where I think the feedback comes, and that's where I think traditionally I focused on the goals, right? So 90% of students can read, other metrics that we've got. So having goals around MCAS I just want to make sure in another year, are we going to be having these same sort of discussions where, teachers are going to be coming and saying, we're spending too much time teaching to the test. We have to do, I just want to make sure we've got a curriculum that is really focused on teaching the what we're expected to teach to students.
Right.
And as a result of that, MCAS scores go up,
Right.
not, we're teaching sort of a testing protocol.
Yes, and that is what we were trying to do, is look for the improvement in the curriculum, for the general curriculum for students, to have a better experience for them, instead of stopping in then April, starting the worksheets and saying, okay, here's all these are the types of questions. We do some of that, but you could really try to just make them take test item after item, like that have been released, and prep them for the MCAS. But we decide to hold off and really try to go with a stronger curriculum. So we have moved over to Carnegie. We've had professional development in the summer over it, and now we have coaching, that they come in and they're observing the teachers. And then after they observe like a grade level worth of teachers, they're at the common planning time with the teachers and giving them feedback on the implementation of the program, so that they can strongly implement the program. So I think that's what also, we didn't have that in our other math program. We were not monitoring the implementation of that as strongly. So I feel like we're up to a really good start this year to get that program up and running, and we're hoping to see the much better numbers in next school year.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at any of the data, PSAT, SAT, we are remarkably close to the state average in most categories. Now, there are a few where we're off, but looking at the SAT data, that just really fell off a cliff, right? 253 test takers down to 58. Yeah. And we didn't have any uptick. I'm assuming in the ACT, there was no sort of shift to that.
We're more
place of SAT. I'm assuming it's probably the same since it was optional.
Right,
so,
we could look into that, but
again, it's kind of another data point that you're like, well, we don't have this data point, right? The MCAS is
right.
a little bit off. And so more and more having data on relative effectiveness of how well students are doing, it's going to probably take, I don't know, a year or so to get back to some sort of level of normalcy where you will have a collective sample to be able to use this. Now, I do hope, and I think you've said this before in previous meetings, you do dig down into the data when you get these results, right? You do look at it by school, by grade, by the questions, right? We've all talked about the questions that are on the MCAS and say, did we teach this particular question? Right. So it's not like we look at this and say, this is a surprise and gosh, what do we do? We know every single one of these questions. We know where it fits in our curriculum. We've adjusted our curriculum to make sure that these topics are taught at a timely manner. So those are just more like comments as to the rationale for thinking through this. But, I know in working with some of the, social emotional learning, a lot of this is helping, and it's going to be needed, I'd say, for another year or two. So that's fine. Those are my comments. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Robin?
Yeah, I just have a couple questions. So I know all the tests they're not really that accurate because of the pandemic, but when I was looking at the AP scores, are we part of like a cohort, or have all the teachers who are teaching an AP class, have they gotten trained through the College Board of some sort?
For the most part, we used to send them to St. Johnsbury when they went out
Okay.
there, but then we've had teachers, anyone that's new that comes on, they go on online training. So medical
Okay.
you did for AP economics, and anyone taking it, any new AP, we send them out right away for training.
Okay.
And then we do have some AP teachers that like to revisit it every now and
Right.
then, just because they hadn't had the training in a couple of years, they like to revisit, just make sure that they're on track and that they're targeting the right types
Okay,
of
great.
students.
Okay. The other thing, looking at the elementary data, as far as like the reading for the goals, and then so it says 80% of students will read at or above grade level. So I know that in 2020, DESE came out with the guidelines that every kid K through 2 had to be screened for dyslexia. So I'm just thinking, like, to be transparent, and the one thing I did hear from parents, community members throughout the whole process was that they're really concerned about reading at the elementary level. So I didn't know if that dyslexic dyslexia screening had happened yet? Has it communicated to parents that, hey, this is like going on for everyone? And then what's the next steps if like your kid, I know like they can be recognized, but that doesn't mean they have it. Like are there actual phone calls going home and saying like, hey, these are the next steps? Because I know that a lot of parents, when they go to the parent teacher conferences, like they wouldn't even know to ask about that because they don't have a background in education. So don't want to put you on the spot, Julie. I'm just asking. I'm going to have another question
We are starting
too.
the screening process, so that's, I can answer that part, and then Julie will give you the details.
Yes, so we have, so as you stated, the state had put forth that for this school year, every district would need to complete a dyslexia screener for all of our kindergarten students. So we wrote a grant. We didn't get it, but we still went ahead and purchased what we needed. Yep. So we implemented the early bird screener, which is a screener that's approved, one of the approved screeners from the state. And we are in the process of, we're finishing up collecting that data this week. And then we actually have data meetings scheduled with the literacy specialists from Early Bird. And they walked us through, it's very fascinating actually. They walk us through profiles that pop up and exactly what next steps you need to take with each of these students. So the other thing I would say, two things, one that you brought up, Robin, that, so yes, it is a screener. It does not mean that, it does not mean based on how the student does on the assessment, there's an algorithm, which I don't understand. I know the subcomponents that make up the algorithm, but there's a mathematical way where a student could be identified as at risk for dyslexia. It doesn't mean that they are dyslexic. It means that the combination of how they performed on certain subtests flagged them. So yes, we have begun to get that data back in. But the other thing I would tell, the second part I would tell you is that when we've been talking to the literacy specialists from Early Bird, they've been doing this for a few years now. Obviously, they had to test it out and use it in different districts. There are way more current kindergarten students popping up as potential for dyslexia than in any year that they've ever done. So they are actually looking at renorming their scores for the January assessment. So we will give this assessment in the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and the end of the year to our kindergarten students. Next year, they are going to be providing it for pre-K and first grade, so it will be expanding. I lost my train of thought, but I had one other thought. I think the information is extremely valuable, and it gives us very specific next steps that students need intervention on. And I think it's incredibly important going into this school year that we're having these meetings and having these conversations about our youngest learners. And I think the empowering part of it is that if we can identify these areas of challenge, specific challenges for specific kindergartners, if we can intervene now, then but the empowering part is what we can fix when they're 5 and 6, then will not become pop in 2nd and 3rd grade. So the last thing you asked was about families. So it was communicated in the principal's letter that we were doing this, but the part that you made me think about tonight is how do we communicate that it's complete, and if they'd like to see their students' results, that they can contact their parents, their child's teacher. But I would reiterate that they have stated to us multiple times that there's a lot more students who have popped and I've been flagged than in any year. So I would also want to communicate that we are aware, we're working on next steps for all of these students. And they gave us so many great strategies that, you know, when you're walking to PE, you have these 3 kids at the front of your line and you're going to say X, Y, and Z to them, and they're going to repeat the word back to you. And then on the way back from PE. So we know exactly what these students need, and we've been provided exactly the next steps to take. So sometimes when you look at the data, it might seem overwhelming, but I think we're coming out of it feeling a little bit more empowered, like we know the steps to take, and so we're going to take them. I'd say I'm actually more intrigued as to what we'll see in January, because the data that we have right now is with only 1 or 2 weeks of kindergarten instruction.
Right.
And
So like if they're low on their letter names or their letter sounds, we haven't taught them yet that. That's in foundations, that's happening now. So it will be more concerning to me what students pop in January than who's popped right now. Not to say we're not going to take action, but a lot of the things that they're showing weaknesses in are things that we haven't taught them yet. So I am more intrigued as to what we'll see in January, given the information we have now and given however many months of instruction we have before we administer it again.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I
This
think
is like what I'm doing. This is like my-
well, no, because I think, you know, some parents will get so concerned right away, oh my goodness, and that doesn't mean that your child has dyslexia, but also I'm thinking if you have no background in education, like you might be like, wait, like what is this? What, you know, and I don't know if a parent would know, and I know that there's a lot of questions around reading, so that's why I just wanted to bring that up.
So what about students in 2nd and 3rd and 4th grade then? Are they getting retroactively tested?
So the assessment that we're giving right now is normed just for kindergartners. So it's the state has said we need to assess all kindergarten students. We do assess, we use a different assessment. We use DIBELS, we use running records. We have a multitude of assessments that we give to all of our students, pre-K all the way to 5th grade. But this particular assessment is currently this year just for kindergartners. Does that make sense? So it's not going.
It does. I think what Robin was alluding to in terms of families reaching out to us were those 2nd, 3rd, 4th graders who have slipped through the cracks. And it sounds like they might continue to because this program that you're talking about is for kindergarten will then be expanded to 1st grade next year, which are the kindergartners this year. So those older elementary students are going to continually not be able to take part in this program.
They would not take part in it, but I would say that of all the things that we have been focused on and that we've tried even throughout the pandemic is to stay focused on kids feeling safe and happy and that they're reading, and that those were really our priorities at the elementary level. And I think we've stayed true to that. So yes, they are not getting the early bird screener. However, we have multiple screeners that we do use that are tier 1 that go to all of our students. We collect a lot of data on Google Sheets. You only see a part of it here. That's one piece. That's the running record, which is sort of them putting it all together. But the DIBELS assessment looks at each piece of their literacy, each part. Do they know their sounds? Do they know their blends? All of the pieces that make up, that get you to reading. So it's not that we're not assessing our older learners. It's just that this new assessment that we are using feels more comprehensive and detailed than anything we've ever done. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I don't want to throw
no, it sounds reassuring.
Under the bus, but the information that we're getting from this assessment is unlike anything we've gotten my whole time.
We can target them earlier on so that they're not struggling later on. Yeah. Okay, I have another question, but I don't think this is really for you because I asked this, I think, in like July. We had brought up before Lucy Calkins and stuff like that, and I had asked if we could, and I know the MCAS data this year is kind of wacky, but still, if we could compare districts that have gotten rid of Lucy Calkins reading and writing completely because it's not evidence-based and compare it to what they scored on the MCAS. I get that's only one measurement, but I do think a piece of why we have a lot of struggling readers, which then goes into the math concerns we have, you know, because they're not understanding the vocabulary, word problems, etc. And then it's going all the way up to 12th grade, you know, so I know I brought this up before. It's a big concern I have. Julie, this is not on you. I had asked for the comparative data, so I don't know if that's Mary or Lisa who can get that for us, but I really am concerned because at that, you know, once they hit 4th grade, like they will be lost forever. So I would really like to see what's going on in other districts as far as that go, who are not struggling like we are with reading.
So we've been looking at that, you know,
Okay.
you brought it up, but we also were aware that science of reading has been a big push for in elementary ELA. So we've done a lot of research. We do have a phonics program, from Wilson, the Foundations program, which many districts have, and it's a strong program, but it is missing one component. So we've done a lot of research on that part, on the phonemic awareness. So Julie So we do that along with Lucy Calkins. So we don't rely on Lucy Calkins for.
No, I'm wondering if we can like get rid of it completely because it's not evidence based.
We feel like there's strong for comprehension has engaged our students and we've had some good results coming out of reading and writing workshop, but we're really focused on the foundations for phonics. And then Julie, you want to talk more about what you've been.
Sure. I guess what I would say, and again, this is my opinion. I guess what I would say is that the part about reading and writing workshop that is most powerful in our classrooms is the students having voice and choice in what they're reading and what they're writing. And the basis of Teachers College reading and writing units of study is that students come to the table with ideas, with thoughts, and it's our job to channel them into awesome books where they can talk about books and read about books and write about what they want to write about. And so it does provide a structure K-5 for us to do that work and to continue it into the middle school as well. Here's my second part to that. So the part I think is the strongest about those units is the student engagement, and that the majority of the time during reading and writing workshop is spent with students engaged in their writing, in their reading, and teachers pulling small groups of students and conferring with individual students and giving them feedback that's specific to where they are as a reader and where they are as a writer. Where it is not as strong is in the phonemic awareness, in the phonics, all of those pieces. And that is something that we're currently looking at very, very closely right now. And I'm just being completely honest. I personally don't feel that we need to move away from reading and writing workshop in order to strengthen the parts that need to be strengthened, if that makes sense. We have foundations in pre-K, K and 1 and 2. We have words their way in 3, 4, and 5, where they're looking at patterns of words and how words are built. We're looking very closely right now, and we're doing lots of reading. I have books in my bag I can show you about the shifts that we need to make in order to incorporate the science of reading research into our balanced literacy program. And I think that's really the key for me, is that it's about balance and it's not about one size fits all, but I need to make sure that every student has every component that they need in order to read and write, without losing that engagement, without losing that excitement that I'm a reader, I'm a writer, and I don't want to lose the part of kindergartners walking down the hallway like saying, I'm a reader, and I'm in there, like that love of reading and writing. If we don't have that in elementary, that's the excitement that we want to have there. That's not to say that all the other stuff doesn't matter. It does matter. And we will make the changes necessary in order to strengthen the parts that need to be strengthened.
Okay.
Does that mean I'm ready to make the changes next week? No, I'm doing them slowly. We started at professional development in August, talking about some small changes that we could make to shift our instruction based on the science of reading. Teachers College is rewriting their reading and writing units to incorporate the science of reading parts. The early bird screener is all based on science of reading. I've bought additional resources for the reading teachers and the Title I teachers to use, and I'm looking at closely what are those missing pieces that need to be strengthened in order to make sure that our elementary students are all reading on grade level by the time they leave 5th grade. And to be honest, it's my passion. I would not like to leave this job until that is the case. And I really feel strongly that it can be done. We have the resources, and Keith will let me buy the resources that I go across the hall and say, I really, really, really need X, Y, and Z. I've already bought stuff to look at, but I also don't like to rush through anything. I want to look at it closely, have reading teachers look at it, have primary teachers look at things, and put all those pieces together. But please know that it's something, I mean, you can look at my bag right now, and I have.
Oh, I trust you. No, I believe you. I believe you. I believe you. I just, let me see. I want your notes too.
So please know that it's something that we're talking about, looking at, paying close attention to. Okay, I talked.
No, I appreciate. No, and I don't want the kids to ever lose engagement either. I 100% hear you. I just want to make sure that we're not leaving any kid behind, and that when we're looking at the science of reading, we're actually looking at how the brain works and what learns best. I was the whole language approach did not do me well, and I only learned all about the other stuff when I got my master's in reading. So I get it, but yeah. So I'm done. I have no more questions. Alice,
Robin?
you're up.
Alice.
Oh,
They're not the same. They're different people, Eric.
it's been a while. That's the.
Could I ask you your opinion on the MCAS findings, particularly in the elementary? Just, yeah.
Okay, sure, absolutely. I have opinions about everything. Lisa's like, do not say anything. Okay.
I figured that.
I have, so
That's why you're here.
I actually think that at elementary we were above the state in ELA and math. We were a few points below the state in 5th grade science, and that is on me. One, I taught it online last year, so that's legitimately on me.
To preface it, you didn't start teaching it until what?
I did a lot of teaching.
No, like
science
in
online last
January.
year.
Let's be honest. The 5th grade students
lot
did not
of-
get science until like January.
And part of that, but that's also on me because I made the purposeful decision that whatever time students had in the building should be on reading, writing, and math. And something had to go because we didn't have a full day with students. And so the science scores are on me. They're not on anyone else. That I had to lie that cups were condensating in front of me because the air purifiers were going and they weren't actually condensating. And I had to
They would normally.
I said, and the kids at home didn't know. I said, oh, the cup's wet. It's not wet. But I made the purposeful decision during the pandemic to move science, not to prioritize reading and writing and math when they were in the building. So am I surprised they were below the state in science? No, not at all. But I think that the elementary teachers worked incredibly hard the last year and a half to really get as much reading and writing and keep those same expectations of what kids can do when we had them, and to make the most of that time. And the students who were fully online, that was actually, I don't remember what month it was that it shifted, that anybody who was hybrid was in, and I did a lot of subbing in the fully remote classes. There was a lot of magical, amazing stuff happening online with reading and writing and math. It was just, I think students appreciated by the end of the year, and teachers too, that people were where they wanted to be and that everyone made sort of the best that they could of it. So my interpretation of the elementary MCAS scores is they're okay. Do we have a lot of work to do? Absolutely. But we always have a lot of work to do. We're never where we want to be. But I actually feel like that's not that bad for what we
So when you dug into the MCAS findings, and I could focus on ELA right now, were there certain questions that the students were missing? Like, were you seeing trends? Were you seeing trends by school? Were you seeing trends by demographic? Was there anything else in that data that you kind of were surprised by or made you feel more powered by?
I think what it actually goes back to is what we were talking about before. I think the MCAS is important. I think that we need measures that go across larger amounts of people to judge sort of how we're doing, right? Are we on the ballpark? Are we way off the ballpark? But honestly, that's sort of where it ends for me. When I start to dig down and I can see specific grade levels or specific teachers or specific, I don't want to put that much stock in it because I know those teachers. I've been in their classrooms. The cohorts are different. Teachers, everything is different year to year. I look across the big trends, like do we need to do some more work with nonfiction versus fiction? Yes, that's true everywhere. So I'm looking at big trends because I worry that I don't want one snapshot in time to, I don't know how to say this appropriately, not cloud my judgment about why this grade at this school versus this grade at another school. When really when I get to the classroom level, I'm looking at reading workshop. I'm looking at their running record levels. I'm looking at their conference notes. What are the next steps that are happening with these students and these students? And so I feel like that is much more valuable information to me in a given moment. Mcas gives you a big screenshot, which I do think is great, and we do have to take from it. But I put a lot more stock in sitting in a reading workshop classroom and watching the teacher conference with kids, have that mini lesson, look at the data I'm seeing populate into the Google spreadsheet, and watching kids over time. Does that make
That makes sense.
okay? That's
Yep.
my opinion.
Thank you for sharing that. I do have a couple of questions. So this formative assessments that, you showed some screen grabs of, how will that be shared with parents? Will it be shared with parents and caretakers, or will this only be seen by teachers and shared amongst peers?
Yeah, for the most part, it's for the teachers' use only, but when the conferences, I feel like many of the teachers will share the formative assessment data during parent conferences with them. But Ellen,
So do parents have to ask for that? Because I don't know. I don't think I've ever, and maybe I've seen the one all the way over to the left.
Yeah, that's mostly elementary. The graphing, the apps really are being used at the secondary level, where they use go formative as a form of assessment, because they've had the Chromebooks longer and things like that. So that's why Ellen's coming up.
Yeah, so we've used a lot of those screenshots were from the middle school. Philosophically, I mean, formative assessments aren't graded, right? The whole point is to measure students' progress to, on their trajectory towards mastery. So it's not meant to be a grade per se. They are used extensively in conferences. So certainly preparing for November 2nd, teachers are grabbing as much formative assessment data right now as they can so that they can be prepared when they meet with parents and caregivers to be able to show a picture of where their students are right now. Some of our teachers, some of the limitations of Power School are that Power School is sort of meant to be a traditional ABCD grade reporting system. And so teachers have really tried to sort of fit the square peg of formative assessment into the round hole of Power School by, some of our math teachers will have it in, have formative assessments in Power School, but then have them not count towards the grade. Sometimes that can be concerning, though. You look in Power School and it's, the data says one thing, but then the grade might say something else. So it's an imperfect system, but it really is a tool for, like you said, communication between, really primarily between the student and the teacher. And then teacher, student, and caregiver, ideally, when you're having conversations about student progress.
So you actually just were leading into my next question about grading, because I am curious about that. Is there plans to continue with the traditional grading system of ABC, or is there a desire to shift?
It depends who you ask. If I ran the world, if I ran the middle school, in a top-down way, we'd be using standards-based grading like a year ago. But it's a very, very long process. I think it was folks from Salem Public Schools we heard speak years ago about their transition to standards-based grading. And what they said is, and Peter can probably speak to this from his time in Salem, it's really, you make the instructional and philosophical shift first, long before you see a change in how reporting, until report cards change. So it really, that would have to be a huge, really, that would be our school improvement plan. That would have to be really, I think, align with district goals before we took that on. It would be sort of the primary focus. I think I would guess if I were to survey faculty, there's definitely a strong contingent that would love to go to standards-based grading, and there's a very large contingent that is not just that.
And standard-based is meeting expectations, exceeding expectations, correct?
Correct.
And some teachers at the middle school, you'll see them set up their Power School gradebook in a way that their kids are meeting standards. So they're trying to reflect standards-based grading within the Power School format. A lot of them get together and really figure out how the numbers all work.
I love Power School.
Well, it tells you, it gives you
It's
good
brand new to
information.
me, and
Yeah, it is.
I can't stop it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
by the
Instant
way.
progress report every day.
There you
Yeah, my son doesn't like that I have it, but I do, so thank you. Besides the parent-teacher conferences that do happen on November 2nd, will there be additional time for parents to reach out for these assessments if they do want ongoing conversations with teachers?
I mean, specifically for the middle school, certainly at any time, a team meeting, you could always request a team meeting, phone call, email, whatever. But our formal structures are the conference days, but
Okay.
certainly, the team structure really lends itself to having those check-ins
Because
as well.
I think, like, as a parent, we don't see this assessment until the Mcas scores come, and I think that's why we focus so much on Mcas. I mean, even when we look at the high school standardized testing, right? You're talking about you're talking about AP students. You're talking about kids taking the PSATs. That's it's not everyone, and I think I always just worry about the children who are falling through the cracks, or those that might not be captured in the AP data or the pre SATs and that kind of point of it. So I think that's, if parents know and are aware of having this assessment is available to them, I think it's empowering for them to know that and to reach out to their students, teachers to ask for that. So, and as a parent, I think it's very disheartening every year where it's average. We're just below average. We're average. Because I know we can be better than average. And, when I see the goals of the district, I want us to achieve that. I want us to say we are above average. We work so hard in this district to do the best for our students. And I think we should continue to strive for that. So in terms of the goals, I'm glad that we see that. I'm concerned earlier where you've identified two specific grades. Was it the 8th grade and the 10th grade?
6th and 8th.
6th and 8th. And they're continuing to have struggles. Do we know the specifics of what's behind that, and what more can we do for those two grades specifically?
We feel like in math, we feel like we needed a new program to refocus us on the grade level standards, and that we're hitting that are more aligned to the new frameworks that came out. So that's why we made the shift to Carnegie to really kind of help teachers really see the grade level benchmarks on that. So we feel like that's been really important. And then the professional development of having that coach in as we begin to implement it is very helpful. The first meetings, Ellen's been involved with meeting with them. So I feel like that. The ELA scores, we're working on, again, we had our, homegrown, thematic unit kind of curriculum that we've had in ELA traditionally for years. We've started to try to work in some of the Lucy Calkins units of study into that. And so that's kind of where we're at. We're at that middle ground right now of doing that. But what I am seeing at the middle school is that more reading is happening in school. That's how we have to get kids reading, because reading at home is not always happening. So we need some independent reading time. They're doing book clubs where kids get to choose the book that they want to read, and that's really, really important. So I feel like that's a good shift there, but we're really Ellen's working with the middle school to try to do a little bit more with the Lucy Calkins units of study and get on the same page there.
And seeing the hard work that the elementary teachers have been doing around reading writing workshop, it's really come up now to the middle school has been really exciting. In fact, I was in a 6th grade classroom, I think was it 2 weeks ago, and the 6th grade ELA teacher said, these kids are readers. Even now, after last year, these kids came into 6th grade loving reading, having the stamina to read independently for extended periods of time like they'd never seen before. So huge kudos to the elementary teachers, huge kudos to the elementary team, because we are now seeing the fruits of that at the middle school, which is really exciting.
Right. And I do have to say, we are at average, a lot of our scores, but at elementary, we're finding that we're in the teens now. We're 10 points and more over the state average. So I feel like this was a good, especially after the year that we had, that was a bright light that came out of our MCAS scores.
That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, first, do you want to say something?
Yeah,
Peter.
That's a great question.
You got up and you sort of, I just want you to have your say.
I didn't want to interrupt.
He's.
I know, Alice, you would reference the AP and SAT and PSAT data, and I completely get what you're saying. That is a completely group of our students, but we don't want to discount all of our students, which may not be participating in that. And so at the high school level, just to speak to logistically with the sheer amount of courses we have, it can be daunting to sort of take on that task of looking at all those different professional learning communities and groups. We have over 35 PLCs at the high school. And so we're just starting that work that Mary referenced earlier with MTSS. And part of our initial work this week actually is creating a shared vision for the FAR cycle work within the teams. How are we tracking that data? What is that local data that we want to get in each of our common planning time teams so that we can appropriately communicate to the parents? And I think if we learned anything from last year, parent conferences is one venue that we can work with the parents around that data, but we came up with a whole bunch of other accessible ways for students and for parents and teachers to be able to have that conversation. And we invite parents to make meetings with teachers digitally, in person, whatever works for their schedule, because now we have some of the structures to be able to do that. So I strongly encourage people to reach out if they're interested in that data that may not be explicitly stated in Power School.
That's a great message to share. Thank you.
Thank you.
The curriculum people really like what they do.
They do. They're
Yeah,
passionate.
So a lot of stuff has been said here. Some things I don't understand, but so I'm going to start off by asking Robin a question. Robin, you hate Lucy Calkins. Is that correct?
I think it is not serving our students.
All right. And you say that it's not evidence-based.
Research
What
evidence.
do you mean by that?
So it does not reflect how our brain works as far as how we read, write, and comprehend. And there's been a lot of research in the last decade. So I feel like we're a decade behind Danvers
Okay.
when it comes to that.
Do you guys agree?
I mean, I have like thousands of
All right.
articles.
So are you saying that there are problems with it, but you supplement it with other things that make it all work together?
Working towards that, yes.
Okay. Trying to figure out, because it's very negative over here.
We do have our curriculum subcommittee.
Yes,
So we are
work
working
on that.
to have those conversations together to continue to share and to learn from each other.
I think that's what you were saying, Julie, is that you can't live with it by itself, but if you do all these other things that you're pulling into it, as a whole, it works, and it's a better product in the end by using the thing that Robin hates with the other stuff that you're going to add to it, and then when you put it all together, it comes out very positive.
I think that what I've learned in the last 6-ish years, 8, is that no curriculum is perfect. That's very clear to me. And that as research changes and new information is put out, it is our responsibility, my responsibility to read that research and make the best decisions that I can for 5 schools moving forward. And when you're talking about 5 schools and 1,500 kids, and I think the past however many years that I've been in this position show, I don't make a decision like and implement it the next week. So there's a lot of pre-thinking, reading, conversations with teachers that happen before we shift something as big as our reading and writing curriculum.
Right, and it's
That
a
makes
team
sense.
approach.
Yeah, no, it's what I do all the time. I try to bring things down to as simple concept as possible. So, by the way, put me on the non-standard based grading team.
So you'll love it once you learn more
And-
about it.
And if you want to go back to Power School, I think I had the only kid in the history of the school that the principal called to tell me to tell your kid to stop looking at Power School so much.
Aw, that's
Right? All right. So first of all, I'm glad that we're focusing on the multi-tiered system of support stuff that we started, because I think that's set up to catch people when they might be starting to fall through, and it's set up to make sure that we catch them at the different levels, and that's something that I really liked a couple of years ago, and obviously we haven't talked about it, in the past couple of years for obvious reasons, but I'm glad that we're doing that. As far as, here it comes, Jeff, as far as MCAS, I don't understand why anybody even pays any attention to it whatsoever. The state's record with this over the past several years is abominable, and especially last year, why anybody even looks at them and gives any credence to it whatsoever. It's broken to begin with, and last year we didn't even have school half the year, so it essentially means nothing, whether we have good grade, good scores or bad scores, whether they're at state average or above state average. It's like Mark will tell me, but it's the only thing we have, so we have to look at it. And I would say, if I have a broken scale that says I weigh 160 when I really weigh 187, I really weigh 187, not 160. All right. So the point is that why we even look. I mean, it's not telling us anything, and it's certainly not telling us anything this year. People can make themselves think that it does, or it is, but it isn't. So I think that's enough of that. How come we had what do you guys think of not only did you have the lower, not that I care about scores, but you had you worried about the 6th and 8th graders. That's also the grades where we had the most kids opt out. Is there something connecting that also?
Yeah, the lower participation rate did affect some of those scores, although the trend they've been low prior to the opt-out, but that did not help things as well.
Why the opt-out?
It was funny that it ended up in 6th and 8th grade. When
the
you look
question.
back to grade 7, it was up in the 97%. So how did that, how did that?
Yeah, so my question really was, which Eric just focused on, is do we know why those two grades had by far the highest opt-outs?
I don't. I know that, I knew in elementary school that it was a group of parents that were opting out and at the level. So now maybe it was at this grade level and it was scattered across different schools. So the results didn't pop out as much, and that they did when they got to grade 6, but 83% at 8th grade, that's even like lower participation. And if we had accountability, we'd be flagged right away because we're below the 95% participation rate. So
when families opted out, they didn't have to provide a reason why. They simply had to say, my child is not going to be taking the MCAS, so we don't really have any information. I don't know if there's any correlation, but as far as remote to hybrid, our 7th grade had the fewest remote students last year, and 6th and 8th were more remote. And there was a stronger correlation between kids who were fully remote and opting out. So there were more fully remote kids who chose families who opted out, and there were fewer fully remote families in grade 7.
Were the tests in person?
They had, so if you were remote, and if you were still remote in May at the time of test administration, you were able to come in to take the test in person. We provided that option. We had quite a few students did take advantage of that, or you could take the test remotely.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
we had the same at elementary but had a higher participation rate.
I want to go to that slide that Jeff was looking at, which is 18. The only part of that is important to me really is the first one, which is 90% of students will be reading at or above grade level 90%. And what was it? Weren't we close to that before?
Ooh, sorry, I went back to we were at 70. We were at 70.6 or 70% in 2020.
Yeah.
So
now, which leads me to my next question, which is the thing that I think I worry about more than anything, which I think Alice does too, and Robin, and probably all of us, but it's that first and second graders over the past couple of years. Like I still don't understand fully what we're doing to really focus on bringing them, because it's now or never for them. We have to bring them up now.
Grade
So-
3.
Yeah.
So,
Right. So we have reading assessments at the beginning of the year, like end of the year, beginning, middle, and end of the year. So we know what they were in the end of last year. We know we fully have the results from the beginning of the year data. They got the Dibbles data and the data done prior to the administration of the early bird dyslexia screener. So now they have met together as grade level teams with reading specialists and put in.
Yep. So I'd say the biggest thing that we did was we, at the elementary level, added 2 additional reading teachers to our reading team. And so if you remember, during the pandemic, our reading teachers were classroom teachers. So we're going from 0 reading teachers to a team of 8 reading teachers across the 5 schools. So that's 2 additional reading teachers. And so between the additional support and, again, meeting, looking at the data, deciding our intervention groups, we have 2 in the elementary schedule. We have 2 interventionist extension blocks each week. So the teachers use their PLC time to look at their reading data, look at their math data, and plan for, okay, I need to pull these 3 kids on Tuesday because they're not clear on the addition strategies. I need to pull these 3 kids on Thursday because they're all struggling with this reading strategy. Whatever those in time, right then, adjustments that we need to make to our practice, we have a place to do that. We have a structure, like you've heard from Mary, of these meetings where we can have those conversations and make those plans.
We also, right, we've talked about, as we do the mid-year assessment of data, if we need to add in more tutoring hours as well, like we did over the summer model, if we could look at some sort of school year and then be extending that summer model for next summer to keep that catching up all under that acceleration model with our ESSER funding. So that's what the money, right, has been focused on,
And
all reading at the elementary level for all of the ESSER
okay,
funding.
so, and I understand it's only been like a little over a month, but just what are your thoughts as to how it's going so far?
These are hard questions.
That's what I try to do.
I think that elementary is in a place collectively where we have more knowledge, resources, and professional development about reading than we have, this is my 16th year in Danvers, than we have in my time here. That being said, we still have a lot of work to do. We still have a lot of learning to do. We have changes that if we need to make, we will make. And that's how we are at the elementary. We, I don't mean this to sound, I don't want to insult, like I'm thinking about teachers who were here at Smith when I got to Smith. The world is a different place today than it was when I started teaching 4th grade. And I think that the expectations on students have risen, and what we expect a 9-year-old to be able to do is different now than what we expected a 9-year-old to do when I started teaching 4th grade. However, what I thought I was doing when I was teaching reading to my 4th graders at Smith, I was not. That's very clear to me now. A lot has changed. A lot of learning has happened. A lot of research is out. And so I can only speak for the last 16 years, but we have resources, people, ways to collect data, structures for how to talk about that data, places in our schedule to intervene and extend students. And so is it perfect? Absolutely not. We always have so much more. There's always something new to learn, to get better. We were on a trajectory right before that, like that January data collection, right before the March shutdown. we were on an upward trajectory. We were at 70%. We were on our way to do that incremental 10% increase to be at 90% by June 2023. When we all stayed in our houses, March, kids were home, March, April, May, June for the summer. We always see a little bit of slide over the summer. This slide, as you can see, was more significant than we've ever seen, to go from 70 to 53. Might I have hoped we were at higher than 59 at the end of last year? Yes. But as you know, the benchmarks increase as the year goes on. So we started at 53, the benchmarks increase, we did make gains to 59. Our goal is to be back on our original trajectory this year. Our original pre-pandemic 10% each year increase. Is the jump larger this year than we would have had to make if there had been no pandemic? Yes. Do I believe that we can do it? Yes. Are we going to need to continue to push ourselves, think, meet, make changes that we need to make? Yes. I've never not felt like what I needed or what we needed to do the work. Like, thanks to Keith, like earlier in the year, we did a lot of reading about decodables and how are we gonna, we're working towards how do we use decodables? How do you balance that with level text? We're getting decodables. We will make, and we're committed to making the changes that we need to make in order to get ourselves back on that original trajectory. And there's not an elementary teacher who doesn't believe that we want kids to love coming to school and be readers. Those are, that is our, at the end of the day, that's what we want to see. And that's what we collectively believe in. So we're committed to doing what we need to do to make that happen. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
And I'm feeling pretty good. All right, you can take a break, Julie.
Okay, thanks.
I just have one other question, and I just want to know the new math program. What do we love about the new math program?
Oh my goodness, so many things. So I want to talk about our process first. So last year we had a study group. It was almost the entire math department, and we read a book called Catalyzing Change in Middle School Mathematics, published by National Council of Teachers Mathematics. We read the book and discussed it and really came up with our vision. What do we want for our middle schoolers as mathematicians? What do we want in a math program to get them there? So before we looked at any programs, we had a very strong vision of what we wanted. And it was really for kids to see themselves as mathematicians, for kids to grapple with math and to feel good in that productive struggle, that place of feeling like challenge is hard, but like rewarding and exciting, and for kids to see themselves in the math and to see math in their lives and to really be excited about mathematics. And I mean, I'm an English teacher, and I was excited about math. I mean, I was into it. So the math teachers were really passionate about this. We spent so much time coming up with our vision for mathematics and our vision for our math program, and then we went out looking for what matched our vision, and we really found it in Carnegie. It is student-centered. It is really pushing kids to grapple with the math. There's a lot of student-to-student communication about the mathematics. It's not the teacher at the board, watch me solve the problem. It's the kids are grappling with the mathematics. There's a lot of embedded assessment. There's pre-assessment, so teachers can identify what prerequisite skills students may or may not have, so that they know who needs what going into the lesson, going into the unit. There's this Mathia with some of the data when Mary showed the formative assessment. It's this embedded online sort of series of student-paced lessons, tutorials that correspond with the math that's happening in the classroom. And it's not only previewing concepts for kids and then reinforcing concepts for kids, but giving the teachers so much data about where their kids are aligned with skills and standards that they can then use to differentiate instruction. So it's very daunting for 12 really competent, confident teachers to now be back to starting from square one and having to learn a whole new program. But Carnegie's support has been fantastic. Their customer service, I have to say, has been very good as well. Not that that's why we chose it. They've just been really great to work with. I have actually, not just any of the teachers can text our Carnegie trainer, not like our sales rep, but our actual trainer. They can text her, they can email her. They have Google Docs of questions that she's on and responding to and commenting on. She and I meet virtually. She's been in the building several times to work with teachers, to observe classes. She's coming back to do planning sessions with teachers. So we're really excited about it.
The teachers are comfortable with it. They're picking it up and able to implement it.
Definitely. I mean, it's a learning curve, for sure. It's not easy, and it's different ways of teaching, I think, than we've been implementing the last several years, and so it'll take some time to get there. But I think overall, despite the growing pains, they feel good about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Eric.
All right, thank you, Arthur. Everybody has essentially the questions that you asked, all of you, really were so good and got into the depths of what we needed to talk about that I can't think of a specific question I had, and I had a bunch of them written down that I need to follow up because you've hit them all and hit them in quite a bit of depth too. So I will sort of speak in summary terms. I think that in terms of Mcas, number one, it's not the only or maybe even the best assessment tool that we have. The formative assessments are just as important. Mcas, including the scores, if they have a value, the value is in potentially helping with our diagnostics, that we can look at the scoring and see anomalies and see areas where it might be necessary for us to direct our attention. That's a good thing. But especially this year, I agree with Arthur in the sense of don't focus on the scores, focus on what it tells us about what we can do better or differently to help with student learning, which is really what all assessments should be. It shouldn't be about a score. I don't know if we'll ever be ready to move to a skills-based grading system or outcome-based, but really, in a perfect world, that's what you would focus on, right? Because you want to encourage mistakes. Mistakes sometimes lead to bad grades. So, in a perfect world, we'd probably get away from a grading system. But we're also in sort of a naturally competitive world in which people always want to have some benchmark beyond meets or exceeds expectations on which to assess how they think their students doing. So, don't know if we'll ever get there, but having said that, so yeah, Mcas, use it as a diagnostic tool, especially this year, because it seems as though all of the outside factors that everybody dealt with have really impacted the testing. Julie, I applaud you for taking accountability for the science scores. With all due respect, given what you were dealing with, you had to make certain choices. This was a totally unprecedented time. And in every business, in every part of government, in the guy running the restaurant, everybody had to make choices on where the focus would be to keep things moving forward as best you could. So I applaud you for the care that you bring to your work, but I don't believe you should absorb any guilt or any blame for the science scores. You made choices that you had to make. And I appreciate all of you, the enthusiasm that you bring. I think that there is a sense among some that, well, if we just got back to basics and if we just taught like we did 40 years ago, everything would be fine. But the truth is, that is far too simplistic an approach, given that everything has changed in 40 years including in particular the impact of technology on our lives, for good and for ill. The good part being the amount of data that it now provides us and the ability to connect to information. The bad part is how many kids now, they make pads, iPads, and tablets for kids who are preschool. And I watch my grandchildren moving around through the screens, and they're great. But I'm a voracious reader today, and I think Arthur is too. And I bet part of it is because, I seldom saw my parents where they didn't have a book going of some sort. And yeah, they watch TV when I watch TV, but half the time they were reading a book while they watched TV. And I don't know that we have that sort of influence at home anymore, where we're also connected to things that are electronic, that students grow up with reading in the home as a normal part of their routine. And without that, it makes your jobs harder to instill that joy of reading, that joy of writing into people. And I think that, the days, again, partly because of electronics and attention spans and how children learn, the days you can stick kids in a row and expect them to, recite multiplication tables. It just doesn't work anymore. Children learn differently. And they come to us with a different emotional makeup, which is why the focus on social and emotional learning is not some foolishness. It is a recognition of the fact that kids are different today. Now, why is that? Who knows? You'd need to sit down with a bunch of psychologists to figure out why children's needs are different, why they learn differently, why they react to the world differently. But the point is, they come to us needing to be taught effectively, whatever their background, whatever their needs. And so, yeah, you have to focus on things like social and emotional learning and meeting the students where they are and being conscious of, their different cultural needs, different cultural experiences, because the world is changing. So I think the challenge is a little tougher. I appreciate all the information here. I think we're on the right path. I like that we're involving the community in terms of the profile of a graduate. But I think the goal here is that we all want the kids to do as well as they can, to have a chance to do what they want to do in their life, whatever that might be. And so, I appreciate what you're doing, listening to the curriculum staff, listening to all of you. I know you're serious about it. I know you're committed. And I think that's more than half the battle right there. So I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to our Curriculum Center team.
Wait, before we stop, Peter, anything else?
Very good.
All right.
We do greatly appreciate the opportunity of an hour and a half to really talk about one of our major pillars that with COVID, and we realized we needed to have the other conversations. And Mary, Keith, and I spent a good 3 to 4 hours today really talking about the management and operations, and then the teaching and learning, and how, and what's presented here today, and then the conversation with our school committee members really pulls it together. We start with our foundation of the reading, for a strong reading foundation with our students, working then to having the teachers work with the FAR cycle at all levels, but really, let's say that 3 through the 12th grade, continuing that piece of formative assessment. And then what do we do with that information? It's the multiple tiered system of support that we have, tier 1, 2, and 3, to support students throughout their pre-K to 12 educational journey with us. So thank you very much.
Yeah, this might have been the best 90 minutes we've spent in quite a while.
That took so long. The Red Sox were able to score 9 runs in that time.
Really? And what are they going to do in the second inning?
The third inning, 9-0.
Oh, okay, there you go.
So as we do, I think in our other meetings, we're able to take like a really good chunk of time to talk about and spend on one topic. This is really, such as you said, Eric, the quality time for it to be on our curriculum instruction and assessment. And then the rest of our meeting seems to all fall together. Okay.
Review of the October 1st, 2021 student enrollment report.
Thank you. And last month I did give a preview of this information for our September. So October 1, when every district in the state of Massachusetts reports to the Department of Ed, we have 3,331 students. That includes our students within our classrooms and any student that's out of district with us. In looking at it, again, we continue to go back to the pandemic. We do have a smaller kindergarten class this year of 240 students. It's usually higher to 265 or higher. But what we did see is after the pandemic that our first grade class is increased by 25 students. So those kindergartners who were not with us last year, at least 25 have come back. Another change in our, to give you the big overview, again, we continue at the high school level. Our 9th grade class is down about 70 students. The Essex Tech, there are 62 freshmen from Danvers as part of that class. We also had a graduating class that was larger than the incoming 9th grade class coming in. We will continue to take a look at enrollments, the class sizes at middle school and high school as we put together, looking at our budget and looking at resources that we do have within our district. And also, again, looking at that 8th grade to 9th grade transition and the work with Adam and the high school administrative team, that this is the time of the year to really now start to take a look at, as private schools, as Essex Tech gets their information out, to make sure that, for example, what we shared today, what is happening here at Danvers High School, is shared with all of our 8th graders. Homeschooling, getting back to what we have seen in prior years. Before the pandemic, we had 23 students. During the pandemic, 62 students, and at 37 at the moment for homeschooling. And then looking at by school, Great Oak was down about 23 students, the middle school down about the 19, and then the high school down 62 students. So again, we have the 3,331 students for our October 1, which is down about 70 students from last year.
Okay.
So we'll continue to take a look at that. As with the opening of the Smith School and looking at that census data, it really was the students that were the birth to the 4-year-olds. So again, through the pandemic, we're still trying to figure out where some of our students are, but we do see that data, and we would expect that in another year, the kindergarten class would continue to increase as we continue to move forward year by year.
We'll work this way this time. Any questions, Arthur?
Not just a couple. The enrollment amongst the elementaries is more even than it has been in the past. The only thing I see is Highlands is higher, Smith is lower. I would think with the facilities, maybe that's going to
Start to shift.
balance up.
Yes.
Because I noticed the kindergarten is 66 in Highlands this year and 50 in Smith. But if we kind of balance those two, then we really have a nice even spread amongst the schools. Plus Smith can handle more, obviously. And I don't remember this from last year, but are 10, 11, and 12, are they pretty consistent with what they were last year, 9, 10, and 11? Or did we lose students in 10, 11, and 12 from what they were last year, or is it pretty similar?
It is pretty similar.
So those are they've stayed pretty consistent. Okay.
Yes.
All right. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Alice?
When this was shared out earlier, I think what jumped out at me out of concern was the grade 9 drop.
Mm-hmm.
So you said 62 students from Danvers enrolled in Essex Tech. Is that correct? And what was it the year before? Like, so is that an ongoing trend of going up?
Say it's stabilized.
Yeah.
That
Stabilized.
Seems like the number, the outgoing 12th grade was 30 students, which was the last class in the old school, and then it's consistently been in the high 50s or
high 50s, low 60s. Okay. My biggest concern, and honestly, it's just from conversations that I've had, is perhaps a reputation of the high school where 8th graders do not want to go to the high school. And I think that the numbers that I see here supported that. And, I heard from many families that my 8th grader doesn't want to go to the high school. They're asking me for alternatives. I think from what we've heard today, I think we've got to do a better job promoting our high school. Just as much as Essex Tech goes to the middle school for, you know, their show about how wonderful it is, we need to go in there first, right? Like we need to go in there and market our high school and show our students what a good institution this school is and get them excited about continuing within the public school system. I think any student that just drives by Essex Tech is gonna say, I wanna go to Essex Tech. It's beautiful. This facility that we're in is nice and beautiful as well and new. So I think we need to take a more active role in getting students excited about continuing. So I would ask if we could work together and figure out a way, whether or not that's with the new administration within the high school, but changing the perception of the high school, whether or not it's encouraging the different clubs that are here, the programs, but getting the 8th graders more excited about continuing with the high school.
And we agree with that. And November is that month that all of this starts. So we do have the plan to have Adam Federico and the high school team back here at a November meeting to share more with you about the plans and what will happen from November through the times that students make decisions.
Great. That's all I have.
I don't have any questions.
Thank you, all. You all set, Robert?
Yep,
Yes.
good.
Jeff?
Great. So we said 186.62 went to the tech. How many went to other schools? Prep or any other schools? Do we know?
The others, and again, this is the first initial pieces of it, and then in January, the data comes in also. For our other schools, St. John's Prep didn't really change. It's about the same, 89 to 91 students. Bishop Fenwick did increase by 6 students from 24 to 30 students. Let's see. Some of our other ones that are high school, Pingree, 10 students last year, 9 students this year. Austin Prep, 16 students last year, 18 students this year. And then other private, 67 to 73, so maybe it's just a smaller school. So there really weren't any other major pieces other than, I would say, Bishop Fenwick that has 6 students, 6 additional students.
Yeah, I was.
But that can vary too, because 4 years ago, for example, when we look at 4 years of data, it's 32, 27, 24, 30. So it's their numbers are not outliers for this year over a 4-year period either.
Yeah, I wasn't really thinking of the increase. I was just thinking of the more holistic narrative, which is, and I was just trying to get a number, right? Because if I just add 186.62, that's a total of 248, forgetting about the other schools. That's 25% of your incoming class that is going to Essex Tech, which Danvers pays more for students to go to Essex Tech. So I'd rather have the money here to Danvers than funneling extra money to Essex Tech, to be real, right? I mean, we talked about all of these things, these great things that we can and we should be doing. So, you know, and I know we've talked about this before, and is it increasing, is it decreasing? What can we do to sell? I mean, this, you know, I don't know if that's realistic in Massachusetts, where that high of a percentage of your students get an opportunity to do that. I think it's probably a combination of a few things. One is Danvers pays for it. I'm pretty sure other towns don't pay for a quarter of their kids. I could be wrong, to go to somewhere else. Like, I don't think Beverly or Salem or anywhere else would do that, right? So if you don't fund as much, would students go is another sort of question, right? So,
Which I think we have been working on, but I don't think that's our choice.
No.
Students have the choice.
Students have the choice, that's right.
To attend there, and then the
if
admission,
they're accepted, right?
Right, and then the admission process. So it's
if the town funds it.
Well, we don't have a choice.
We don't. Once the school accepts, I have some numbers actually to talk about when you're all set. But once Essex Tech accepts a student, the town simply gets assessed for that student. The town, now, in theory, one supposes town meeting could cut a portion of the budget which would be equal to or some part of the assessment. But we still have to pay. The money would have to come out of somewhere else. And that's simply how the regional technical school program works. So once a Danvers student is accepted, we're on the hook.
So Essex Tech could, in theory, accept their entire student body from Danvers students. Not that they would, but in theory, they could theoretically do it if enough students applied. And we would be assessed that.
In theory.
In theory. Okay. Okay. I was just making sure. But I think the larger point, I think, is what Alice was saying too, which is why is there this desire to go to these other schools if that is the case? And it hasn't been going up. It's been consistent. So it's not like this is something new, but you know.
The numbers I can share will show that it has been going up, actually.
Okay. Yeah, I'm done. Thanks.
Sure.
So then, can I ask another question? Are the right students going to Essex Tech?
It's a good question.
That's a really
That's
good
another question.
And I guess I look at it in a couple of ways, right? It's a vocational school, it's a technical school. Are the students that are getting accepted, are they taking away spots from kids who want to go there because that's a better way for them to learn? So there's that piece of it. Are we able to cap students, like the number of students that can go there?
No, so I can, Lisa, let me jump in and take this, Alice, because we back in July, I want to say, Keith, either July or August, there was a meeting with Steve and interested parties, head of the Board of Selectmen, myself, Keith was there, finance folks from the town, and so in essence, let me tell you what we learned and where we stand. Danvers as a community, a population is roughly 9% of the total population among the sending districts. So among districts that belong, we have about 9% of the population. Our proportional share of students at the tech has increased from 12.2%, 109 seats, in 2017 to approximately 17% in fiscal year 2022. The assessment during that time has, bless you, has increased from about 1.9 million to about 3.4 million. That's coming out of the town budget. For the average annual increase, 15.5% a year, it's easily the single largest budget driver, according to the town manager. He is working on, and we are all working on, how do we approach this? And you have raised the two issues. Number one is purely financial, in the sense that if a disproportional number of Danvers students are selected, then the cost goes up. It's also difficult from the town standpoint to count on a year-over-year budget piece because it's so unpredictable. Right. It could become a budget buster in any given year. The other piece has been raised as well, which is the way the admissions process tended to work. Some of the best academic students, are chosen. As I understand it, the method of acceptance at the Voc Tech has until very recently been grades and activities and what kind of student they're, and lack of discipline problems. So they are taking some of the better students. And look, if that's the right thing for a student, that's what it's there for, is to provide an alternative to the type of courses that we could get here. But ideally, what you would want to see is students who have different abilities and interests that aren't met by a program here would go to the Voc Tech and would literally learn a vocation. Now, the definition of vocation is different now than it was 20 years ago. It's not just trades, it's computer programming, et cetera. But what we have traditionally viewed the vocational school to be, the Essex Aggie and the Tech, when they were separate, was sort of an adjunct to what we could do, because we couldn't provide a full program in the trades and plumbing, electric. It's just not possible. But you could go to the tech and come out of there with a trade and a good occupation and a chance to make a good living, and it helped, add to the trades, which we need desperately now. But that focus is changing. They're sending a higher percentage of their student body to four-year colleges after. So there's a lot going on. And I know the town manager is trying to work with, and we'll be trying to work with the legislature. When we have our legislators visit in November, we'll probably talk about this some. There has been some progress, I think, in terms of the admissions criteria. But in terms of the numbers, caps, things like that, we're just not sure at this point.
So again, it's making sure the right students are going.
Yeah, and I think we're probably going to make some progress in terms of that piece. But the issue is too, the population. I think you're right. I think there is some concern about reputationally about Danvers in terms of the program at the high school, the discipline at the high school, the attitudes at the high school, all of which we need to change. And I think that Adam taking over as principal will help with that. But also, I wonder how many towns have a Voc Tech and something like St. John's Prep right in the town. I do think that contributes because the transportation piece is so much easier. If your student goes to the tech, they still have to get the academic piece. They still go through Mcas testing and all. And increasingly, the program, is allows for someone to think about that, then off to a four-year college. So, the equity involved is a legitimate issue, and it's something that there are ongoing discussions about. I think I summed that up, Keith. Anything?
No, I just the reality of the FY23 budget cycle is that number is going to go up again based on the enrollment from this year because it's based on October 1st. So we should be prepared for that as part of our budget dialogue.
Thank you.
Any adjustments we make to the enrollments would have an effect on the FY24 budget at this point.
So that is the name of that tune and that situation, and I'll continue to keep the committee updated. Any other questions on this issue or item? All right. Moving on, Lisa.
Facilities update.
And I think this will probably be our last regular facilities update on the agenda since the beautiful Smith School is done. We just shared a few pictures in there of the ribbon cutting. I think for me, getting to see the kids do the actual ribbon cutting
that was nice.
Was pretty fantastic. And thank you to Senator Lovely and Representative Kearns for coming out that morning, and to our various select board members, finance committee, school committee members, all for helping show support for the school as we had the official ribbon cutting.
All right. Anything else on facilities? You all set?
That's all.
Okay. So our next item is the MAS and C resolutions. In the past, we have just said to whoever our representative is, this year it's Robin, hey, vote what you want. And I thought it would be nice to take a more comprehensive view, let everybody weigh in to the extent they wish to. And I also have an idea in terms of how we can perhaps streamline this, because I don't think we need to take necessarily to talk at length about each resolution and or take a vote on each resolution. Right, look at Arthur's eyes pop out of his head. So what we will do is, let me ask you this. Do anyone have particular questions about any resolution? So I'm going to start with Arthur. Just tell me if there's a particular resolution that you have a question about or want to discuss. Just give me the number and we'll take it separately.
I'm good.
You're good. Okay. Alice?
I honestly haven't spent enough time, but by the looks of it, I'm good as well.
Okay. Robin?
I am good.
All right. And Jeff?
I am fine, thank you.
Okay. So with that, then someone might want to make a motion to instruct Robin to vote favorably on all of the 9 resolutions that will be before the Association of School Committees in November.
I move to instruct Robin to vote favorably on the 9 resolutions that will be before the MSAC board in November.
I couldn't have said that better
Thank you,
myself.
brother. Thank you.
And we have a second?
Second.
All right. So with that, we have a motion, we have a second. Robin, do you have any questions or concerns?
I do not.
No. All right. Well, that'll call for a vote. So all those in favor of Mr. Scarmus's motion, please say aye.
Aye.
I
Opposed? None. We're good. All right. Thank you. Moving on to a discussion on the superintendent's evaluation process and professional practice goal.
Thank you. So to provide the context, the state had changed in the last couple of years for a superintendent's evaluation to be an every other year process. So that's formative assessment, summative assessment. This is the year for the summative assessment, and in the past we've looked at this over 3 months. We are talking about a professional practice goal first, and then the evaluation, having then the school committee, and why we present the information today around the curriculum instruction and assessment. I will provide you with links to important documents from final accomplishments from last year, today's presentation, so that way you'll be able to fill out the evaluation form. And then the school committee has looked at contract in that third meeting. So that's the overall process that we are back to this year. For tonight's meeting, the goal setting, professional practice goal, we use Teach Point with all of our educators, and this is the same form. So I wanted to share that with you so you see what teachers are filling out. Teachers work with our curriculum directors, and as you saw tonight, again, always aligning what we have for strategic plan, the district goals, what happens at school councils and at the school level for school improvement plans, and then connecting all of that and connecting the work then to professional practice goals and student learning goals. So with that, my professional practice goal for this year, by June of 2022, I will demonstrate courageous caring in my leadership so that the expectation for adult actions are aligned with our core values, mission, and vision. We'll continue to communicate about our district's 3 priorities, interrupting moments of bias and using these moments to model how to understand and address them going forward, to disrupt patterns of inequities, and specifically use the word impact on students. I've had the opportunity to work with a professional coach over the last 7 months as my own professional development moving through the pandemic, and really looking, as we talked about today, teaching the high impact teaching teams. So it really is the impact on students. So we have talked about adult-centered versus student-centered. Our adults are committed to the work that we are doing, and now looking at those collective our individual responsibilities and the collective efficacy. That when it all comes together, when it's the all for our students, when it's all the adults moving in that same direction, that's where we see the impact with our student learning. So that's really the why piece of it, and then the results. For our students, we'll be able to share examples that validate our district's commitment to making decisions that demonstrate that all students are valued for their unique strengths, talents, and challenges, and have a sense of belonging in our community.
All right. Questions for the superintendent on her learning goal? We'll start with Robin.
Oh, learning or professional?
I'm sorry,
Learning.
professional.
Professional. Okay.
My
Threw me
apologies.
off. Okay, so I was wondering, like, the way I'm reading, and I could be reading it wrong. I get, is this like coming out of that, like, because it's based on like what like you need to do as a educator, that the teachers are like not, or adults are not having appropriate conversations that align with the mission and vision? Like, I was just confused. I was reading it as like you had to demonstrate it because someone was doing something they're not supposed to do. That's why I was just curious about it.
No, I would say overall of looking at last year, and we worked with our administrative team on courageous caring, of really looking at what are our actions, and then my own reflections from last year of the impact on students. So continuing to address, and COVID has, at times people have really, the adult pieces of looking at how do we keep everyone safe, and what are the sometimes the working conditions, and it was for our children, for our adults, going through a pandemic that we've never lived through before, and then really supporting the work of our administrative team. And you saw here with the 3 administrators and with Mary, the amount of passion and the resources. I think I should have added in there again the reminder of providing the resources for success, as Julie was talking about, is we have, and school committee has been, and the town has been so supportive. So there's a foundation, and if we can continue to set our adults up for success in their work to continue to look at the impact of students, that it's all of our students. And so it's really not about something that was specifically lacking. It's about their reinforcement of where we've been, and as superintendent, continuing to provide that support for success for all of our adults, but it's going to take all of the adults in our community, our school community, to really make that impact on student learning.
Okay. And this was a continuation of last year's too, you said, because it was 2 years?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And then will we be able to, I know you said you'll like click the resources, give us the resources, like the, will we be able to see kind of like the benchmarks, like the assessments that, you know, to see that you're on track, and also the action steps? Is that available to us as the school committee when we evaluate you?
Yes, it's everything
Okay.
that we have presented. It will be, I would say there's nothing new, because
Okay.
all of the work of the superintendent is the public work. So it's
Okay.
what we have presented, but I will be able to put it in a format so you don't need to go back over 2 years and say, which presentation should I be looking for? But
Okay.
yes,
Okay.
I will be sharing with you those final accomplishments, if that's what you meant
Yeah.
by the benchmark
Yeah.
pieces. Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jeff?
No, I certainly think these are reasonable. I think the student learning goals are aggressive, as we talked about before, which is good. I think the professional goals, which were articulated, help drive a lot of those. I think as the leader for the school district, I think a lot of these are needed in these times to help build the right team, right? To motivate, to make sure we have the resources, the communication. So I think those practice goals can help do that. So I think they're fine.
Mr. Scarnes?
All set.
Dallas?
Is there opportunity for like 360 feedback from your team, your fellow team members, other teachers within the district? Is that also included in assessment, just out of curiosity?
It's not at the moment. In past years, before the state revamped the entire evaluation process, we did look at the 360 evaluation, but we haven't since then.
Okay. Okay, no other questions.
Thank you, and I'm good.
Thank you.
We've been through the process before, and we'll hopefully give you some good feedback.
Thank you very much.
All right. Order of business, the consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any items on the consent agenda that anyone wishes to discuss before voting? I hear none. I assume we're content. So all those in favor of moving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Carries. Mr. Secretary.
All right, I move to approve and release the minutes from the September 13th, 2021 regular meeting and the September 17th, 2021 special meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Carries. Communications, Dr. Dana.
Thank you. Our North Shore Education Consortium, this is the time of the year that our audit is reviewed, and that will start tomorrow with our Finance Committee meeting, and then next week with the regular board meeting.
All right. Legislation, I have a very brief update. Both legislators will be at the November meeting, as far as I know. So Sally Kearns and Joan Lovely, and they'll be here to take questions, tell us what's going on. Sally did share with me that there's the bill pending on educator diversity, which is something we're working on, and I believe it calls to have additional funding available to support that. In addition, ARPA funds, which is sort of a general fund that allows betterment in different communities, there are some Danvers Town projects that could be passed. And she said she's assuming school committee and town manager have had conversations about what might be needs in the school system. So I would think about that too. It's another source of funding. And that is it for now. We can pick up further in November. All right, subcommittee updates. Lisa, you had included the yearly agenda items, I think, for us.
And it's really for reference
Yeah.
to keep us, if people are looking at what is coming next, and if
Right.
it works with Diane and myself too, and working with you as the chair to
Yeah.
keep us on track.
And let's see, curriculum and assessment. I think you had your first meeting. Is that
It
correct? All right. So curriculum and assessment is Robin and Alice. If you want to, anything you want to say about your first meetings?
You want me to go or do you want to go? No, I think, you know, we we went over a lot about the multi-tiered systems of support and really what that meant and what that looked at like at different levels and the different formative assessments and how we're tracking student performance. We talked a lot about how that like the teachers are doing awesome things and many things every day and how like proud we were of them. What else am I missing? We went back to the strategic plan. That was the main. That was the main. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and you've got another meeting scheduled.
In another week, we have equity is coming up next. We have our equity subcommittee coming up on this Wednesday. And then attached to your agenda, Mary was helpful and put together a Google slide, which we'll keep track of. It will almost be like the minutes of our meeting.
Oh, good.
So
Okay.
everything that was talked about at the first meeting is part of the slides to give the foundation. And then we've set a couple dates to look at each level, and our curriculum directors will be involved with each of the two subcommittees.
All right. Jeff and Alice, anything on the equity subcommittee?
We met on the 22nd of September, and we spent our time talking more about using the time to dive deeper into topics more in depth than we would normally at these school committee meetings. So we're hoping that we'll cover each level based on a calendar of like October, January, and March, where we'll hopefully have a curriculum director, principal meeting with us to kind of give us an opportunity to ask questions, provide us guidance and a little bit of ownership with the administration on equity for the district.
Good. And I realize these were the first meetings. They're almost like organizational meetings to get started in both cases. So that's great. Thank you for doing those. Policy, I don't think we had anything.
No policy.
Anything to report on DEEP?
Deep, yes, we do. We have an update from Mary Beth, who should be here to give it herself, but she's refusing to come. She told me that they met at Smith School this month because the PSATs were taking place at here, and they would like to thank Violetta and the staff for letting them meet there. She wants everybody to know that DEEP teacher grant applications are currently open. Teachers have until this Friday, October 22nd, to submit an application. Teacher grants will be announced by the end of November. She also says, save the date. DEEP is once again hosting the Danvers Downtown Holiday Festival and Tree Lighting on Saturday, December 4th from 2 to 5 p.m. More information will be coming out soon. Gardner must be doing something there, I'm assuming. Singing, maybe.
There you go.
DEEP is also working with a DECA group at DHS on a job fair for students. The job fair will take place on December 1st, 2021. Any local businesses that wish to participate can email DEEP at danvers.org. DEEP wine and food tasting will be returning in the spring. A date will be announced soon. Future DEEP meetings will return to meeting at Brookline Bank on High Street in Danvers. And as always, for more information, people can visit www.supportdeep.org and follow them on Facebook. And that's it.
Thank you, sir. Danvers Cares.
Okay, so Danvers Cares, we talked about the Alice and Athena program, which is a mentorship program between seniors and ninth graders. And it talks about nutrition, proper strength training, equity training. And so that's more focused on like athletes, but then we also talked about how through the community block equity training and equity discussions are also happening across the school. So it's not just limited to athletes. And the first major thing that's coming up is the Regional Youth Prevention Network. And this is basically, the focus on this is to basically like get kids to school. The campaign is Every Day Matters, and it actually launched October 13th at the Beverly Y. So
Great. Thank you. Human rights and inclusion, we actually had two meetings. The regular meeting, Dee Joko and was re-elected as chair, and I think we all know Dee is a tremendous asset to this community, and glad to see that happen. And Kristen Perkins, who is one of our newer members, was elected vice chair, and I think she's going to do tremendous things for the committee as well. So congratulations to both of them. And beyond that, at the meeting, there was discussion about the incident at Connors Farm. There was I gave an update about what we were doing in terms of the schools and the equity subcommittee, and then we had a education subcommittee just last week, I believe, focused primarily on the planning for MLK Day rather. Sorry, and then there's discussion about having a student liaison for the committee, and I assume that you're working with Adam on that.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Federico has been working on that, and we hope to have a name of a student or two students for tomorrow.
Excellent.
They do know that there's a meeting, I believe, this coming Thursday.
Yeah, maybe I'll have to check the calendar.
Okay. We'll do a
Sometimes
double
it's
check.
a week beyond where we are.
Okay.
So, but yes, okay, great. And I believe that. does it.
CPAC.
I thought you had
Yeah.
Lisa.
But there was one other update too,
please.
just to share.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. So they are looking for parent liaisons at each school. So if your child is on an IEP and you want to be like the liaison so that, people who are new to the process have questions, they are looking for that. So you can email CPAC, and they would love more assistance and liaisons with parents. So
Back in the day, when my kids started school, each school had a liaison to CPAC. Each school had a liaison to what was then meeting with administrators on a monthly basis. So
PACE, yes.
PACE, yep. So it's wonderful if you can get. Sometimes some PACs are more active than others, but it really is a great opportunity to contribute and bring more information back to your school about what's going on. So thank you, Robin. Didn't mean to run by
it's
you.
fine.
And now, our next meeting is November 8th.
Okay.
All right. Anything else from any committee? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And